thank you. Our regularly scheduled Oregon Watershed Enhancement Quarterly Board Meeting. I'm really excited to be here in Klamath Falls, and we have a great agenda today and an amazing tour this afternoon. I just wanted to say I really want to thank my fellow board members for their engagement yesterday in the strategic planning and all the work the staff did to prepare us, or to prepare for yesterday. With that, we do have a pretty tight deadline today. We do have to leave at 1 p.m. from here, so we're going to do our best to stay on our timed agenda. And with that, we are going to start with board member reports. And I do want to acknowledge Amy. Amy is a brand new board member, and it's Hendershot. Is that how you say it? Okay, excellent. Welcome. And we'll give you a few minutes when we do our board member reports, but I won't start with you, so you kind of get a feel of what it is we are looking for. So I think I'm going to start with Liz in the board member reports.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning. I have allergies, and this is a sinus infection. I got some medication from my doctor, and she said I'm not contagious, but I'm still setting up. Okay. I think I got some relevant information after a couple tries from previous. I'm going to start off with a fire report, and then go into grants after that. So as of Wednesday, October 18th, we officially terminated fire season. And we would call the 2023 season to remember to exit year of partnerships. There was just a number of really great efforts to partners to accomplish the combined effort of suppression. And to give you an idea of the fires, we had 184 lightning strikes that resulted in over 10,000 acres of burning. We had human cost plus an unknown 791 of those that resulted in only 7,000 plus acres of burning, for a total of 975 fires and close to 18,000 acres of burning for the ODFW. As far as the incident demands, we had a couple deployments back in July 22nd. We had the ODF IMT cover the Golden fires in the Klamath Falls district, and then secondly, we had a second deployment on August 25th in a cluster of 19 individual fires that we call the Tiny Bridge Complex that stretched from the California border to the Washington border. Let's see. As far as safety, we had an excellent safety record with 0 significant injuries or accidents despite a large exposure to fire. So that's our fire report for the year of partnerships. Want to report out on some of our grants. ODF is still engaged in the Community Wildfire Defense grants. The funding comes through the Forest Service through the bipartisan infrastructure law. This is the second year of grant opportunities, and the submission of those closes on Halloween 10/31. Last year, Oregon was quite successful with 10 projects with over $20 million to the state, and the OWEB staff has been engaged in helping identify those priority projects. Secondly, the ODF Forest Legacy Program, it's been very active. There are 2 recent projects near the Tualatin Hills and Lyman area are moving forward to their completion. And the OWEB has been a great partner in leveraging those funds to review and explore applications. For the future, in this program, we're expected to continue to have more funding in the coming years. And just a summary for 2023, ODF secured more than $80 million in federal grants, mostly with increased opportunities through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so typically, ODF is garnering about $20 million per year in these federal grants. That's my report.
Thank you, Liz. Any questions for Liz? All right, moving on to Aaron.
Good morning, everyone. Aaron Curtis, representing the Bureau of Land Management. I know I've said this at a last couple of board meetings, but we finally did receive some Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law funding, and so I'm very proud to announce we did invest about $2 million at the end of last fiscal year in Oregon and Washington. But many of those projects are going towards aquatic restoration, riparian restoration projects throughout Oregon and Washington. And if you're not aware what the BLM, and I think in some ways the department, we're trying to basically get on the same page of where can we invest a lot of these dollars to really turn the needle in terms of climate change resilience and making a difference out there. So at least for the Bureau of Land Management right now, those two landscapes that we're focusing on are southwestern Oregon and southeastern Oregon. So I kind of refer it to keeping it simple as the salmon and sage grouse landscapes, right? To just give you a sense of what we're looking at there. And if folks are interested in any maybe specific projects, I want to say there were around 19 riparian and aquatic restoration projects in that $2 million pot. So if folks are curious, I can certainly, I'm sure I've got a spreadsheet in this laptop telling me what those are specifically. So just get in touch with me over a break. Another important thing I would just throw out since the last time we met was we had a pretty major victory in the courts. The Bureau of Land Management's resource management plans for Western Oregon, so that's 5 districts, really in between the coast and the Cascades, where we have a pretty robust timber program, around 2 million acres of BLM lands there. And our resource management plans from 2016 were challenged in a variety of different court jurisdictions. It got confusing really fast, but eventually the courts merged 5 different cases together, and our resource management plans were upheld in all 5 of those. So that's a really big deal for us. It's my understanding this is actually the first time in 30 years the BLM in Western Oregon is operating under a resource management plan that's not being legally challenged, right? So really big deal for us. We're really excited and proud of that. And I think ask me questions if you're interested in that for sure. And then the other thing I would just mention for folks who may be interested, we are developing a new resource management plan for the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument right around in this neighborhood here. So we're actively developing the draft plan that will go out for public comment for a couple of months, and we're expecting to do that sometime in calendar year 24. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Chris, what do you want us to know today?
Thanks, Barbara. Seems a little early to be addressing a group without much coffee, but I'll give it a shot. I've got quite a bit to share this morning. Again, Chris Allen, representing U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a non-voting member. I wanted to share some news on the listing, kind of the listing and delisting front for federally protected species. Just a few weeks ago, we announced the delisting of Nelson's checker mallow, a plant from western, the Willamette Valley and western Coast Range area of Oregon and Southwest Washington. That follows the delisting of several other plants over the last couple of years, including golden paintbrush and Bradshaw's lomatium. We often in the news, we hear so much about the listings and maybe not as much about the delistings. I think it's fantastic to share the news of that and to be actually taking species off the list instead of constantly adding. But I guess on that front of potentially adding, we did announce just earlier this month the proposed listing as threatened of the western pond turtle that extends from Washington all the way down through Western Oregon and down into California and actually down into Baja as well. We expect a decision on whether we will list that both those species about a year from now. I wanted to mention Western Ridged mussel. I think I've brought that species up in some of my prior reports. And we were petitioned by the Xerces Society back in 2020 to list that freshwater mussel. We've been working on a species status assessment for a couple years and what we call a 12-month finding, basically where we announce whether we determine a listing is warranted or not. And we expect to make that decision fall of 2024. If we move forward with the proposal to list Western Ridge mussel, it would be a pretty big deal. It would be the first freshwater mussel proposed for listing in the Western US. Bull trout is a species that our office spends a lot of time working on in terms of recovery. We've also been working on a species status assessment and what we call a 5-year review of that species range-wide. 5-year reviews are something we do for listed species every 5 years just to do a check-in on the classification to determine whether their status is still warranted, whether that's threatened or endangered. So we expect to finish that 5-year review similar to the Western Ridge mussel early in 2024 for bull trout. Shifting away from the listing, delisting front, a few other news tidbits I thought would be worth sharing. My agency, led by our office, the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Service, Oregon Fish and Wildlife Office, excuse me, just released a draft barred owl management strategy and associated draft environmental impact statement. In close coordination with our key partners, state, federal, and tribal. For those not tracking the issue with barred owls are a major competitor and considered an invasive species in the Northwest, and a significant competitor with the federally threatened northern spotted owl. Let's see, our office in my program specifically just completed a reintroduction feasibility assessment for bull trout in the North Santiam River, where they've been extirpated for over 50 years. We expect to coordinate with key partners in that area, Forest Service, ODFW, Corps of Engineers, and Grand Ronde, Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde, to determine whether we want to move forward with the reintroduction of bull trout in that watershed. So that would be looking more closely at the social and economic support for moving forward with the reintroduction. Moving on to habitat conservation planning. Our office is working on a number of HCPs right now, including Port Blakely, the Western Oregon State Forest, the Elliott State Forest, and an HCP for the private forest accords. These efforts are consuming very much an unprecedented amount of staff time in our office and will continue to in the foreseeable future. For those that aren't aware of HCPs, they're a way to provide legal coverage and regulatory certainty for non-federal actions that have impacts on federally protected species or those species that are considered sensitive that may warrant federal protections in the future. On the personnel front, a couple of things of note. Kim Gardner, who used to run our forest resources program, has left our agency for the regional office of the U.S. Forest Service. Mike Blau, who was working as a branch manager underneath Kim, has moved up into her former position in our office. Did want to touch on the bill funding, bipartisan infrastructure law. That funding has provided a number of new positions in our office, particularly in our Bend and LeGrand offices. A lot of that funding is to support consultation with the U.S. Forest Service associated with fire recovery and field work. A few other positions are also being filled in our East Side offices, again, Bend and LeGrand, primarily to support sage grouse and sage grouse ecosystem health type activities. And closing in toward the end of my report, I'm sorry, I'm a little long-winded here. I'm on the budget front. It looks like our agency's budget is likely to remain relatively flat over the next couple of years. And then lastly, I wanted to thank Courtney and Stephanie for reaching out a couple weeks ago to talk about a upcoming trip to DC to meet with federal agencies. And I think sounds like Lindsay and Kelly, you're going along on that trip as well. And I've been speaking internally with our state supervisor, Cassina Lee, and a few folks from our regional office, just to develop some talking points for you, as it sounds like you may be trying to meet with our director and some of our other key leadership back in headquarters. So we'll try to get some of those talking points to you in the next week or so, as I know that trip's coming up. And that concludes my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Dan, what do you want us to know today?
I was just gonna fill folks in on some money that's moving out of EPA, a lot of it through bipartisan infrastructure law. Pardon me. I think I'd mentioned this before, but we announced these Thriving Community Technical Assistance Centers in the Willamette Partnership and Portland State University's Institute for Tribal Government are co-managing a technical assistance center here locally. And the activities will focus on underserved communities and including tribal and indigenous communities in rural areas. And yeah, they're designed to really help on helping folks navigate through the complex federal grant system, as well as be prepared to be competitive for those grants. EPA recently announced $19 million in drinking water system infrastructure resilience sustainability grant program. This is going to be a nationally competitive grant program for drinking water systems. Eligible applicants will include public water systems and a water system located in an area governed by a Indian tribe or eligible territories and states on behalf of communities that are underserved and small or disadvantaged. Again, a big effort of EPA's, and the bill is really trying to help those communities who really need the help and don't have a lot of the capacity to get the help. Also recently released is $7.5 billion available in financing for water infrastructure projects. This is under the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It's a complement to the state revolving fund that folks may be a little bit more familiar with. And as an example of that, a $16 million WIFIA loan was given to Oregon City to modernize a century-old infrastructure to meet drinking water needs of the city's residents while better preparing the community to be resilient to like wildfire impacts. We do have a website that if folks are interested in the state revolving funds, is about 50 billion moving out for infrastructure projects, and about 85% of that flows through the states in the state revolving funds. And so we just have a website that's publicly available to help folks track that money's movement to the states. And then lastly, and much more locally and much more dear to my heart, we had been through our drinking water provider partnership. We had been working with the states of Oregon and Washington on connecting small drinking water providers with their watershed. And in many cases, these watersheds are privately held working lands, and some of these communities suffer from some pretty significant impacts to their drinking water systems. And when we talk to them, they're very interested in pursuing like conservation easements or land acquisition to protect their drinking water. But they don't have the technical capacity to do all of the prerequisite work and to go for the SRF application. So we have tailored a very, very specific technical assistance agreement to push out as a pilot program. And we're funding that through EPA Region 10's Environmental Finance Center, and that's run by RCAC. And hopefully we'll get some help to people who need it. And that's it.
Thank you, Dan. Mark, please.
Thank you, Barbara. Mark Labhart, and I am on the Fish and Wildlife Commission, and I live in Sisters. And I want to thank staff for providing me the information today to help with the report. So it's always appreciative of staff to provide this information. So about 6 different items to cover. Okay, keep going.
My fixer.
ODFW is seeking public comment on what we call our Draft Wildlife Corridor Action Plan. The plan was developed to provide guidance for preserving long-term habitat connectivity for wildlife in Oregon. And habitat fragmentation, as we all know, can impact wildlife by impeding migration routes, making it more difficult for animals to seek new habitat and in response to the disturbance of changing conditions. Corridors can lessen these impacts that are identified, and we're seeking public comment on it right now. And the best way for you, if you are interested in these action plans, the maps are out right now identifying these corridors, and it was a significant effort by the department where they put collars on wildlife, mainly mule deer, throughout the state, and over a period of about, I think, 3 years, monitoring these corridors, and got pretty good established corridor lines throughout the state of Oregon. So if you just Google ODF&W Wildlife Corridor Action Plan, that'll take you to the place where you can make a comment on it if you'd like. Then there's a nasty little mussel called the quagga mussel that we definitely don't want to put him under the Endangered Species Act. We want to get rid of this little sucker. The quagga mussel is a little tiny mussel. It's an invasive species that is getting very close to Oregon right now. And they were detected in the Snake River in Twin Falls, Idaho on September 18th. And what these little suckers do, these little buggers, they're little tiny mussels, and they get into water pipes and water lines, and they completely clog it. And they travel through boats that are in places where these mussels live in the Southwest. They'll get onto the motors and the part of the boats, and then they'll travel to Crescent Lake or whatever and drop off and can get established. So we're have quite an extensive program to keep these little buggers from the state of Oregon. This is the first time this species has been detected in the Columbia River Basin. It's located approximately 60 miles from the Oregon border right now. Now, they're a serious concern because of the damage they can do to lakes, streams, irrigation infrastructure, and water delivery systems. So we prevent quagga mussels and other invasive species from reaching Oregon through our watercraft inspection stations and decontamination stations. So if we detect it on a boat motor, there's a process that they can go through, or it's called a hot wash, where they can wash it off and hopefully keep it from coming in. So, but it's getting closer. So we're watching that one very, very closely. Private Forest Accord Mitigation Fund website. ODF&W website for the Private Forest Accord is now up and operating. It's called pfagrants.com. The PFA is a landmark agreement between the timber and conservation groups to expand protection for fish and amphibians, while also providing regulatory certainty for the timber harvest and forest management groups. Passed and signed into law in 2022, the legislation established the Private Forest Accord Mitigation Fund. This fund is administered by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and it will fund projects that offset the impact of forest practices to benefit aquatic species and aquatic habitats in Oregon. And it's a significant amount of money, about $10 million, I think, annually. So it's a significant amount of money, and the grant process is open right now, pfagrants.com. The first rounds of grant applications will open in November. And if you want more information, again, go to pfagrants.com. And then on a very positive thing, every year we have wildlife stamp competition where artists can submit their various artwork, and that is coming up here shortly. We have 3 stamp art competitions each year. The Habitat Conservation Stamp features a species of Oregon conservation strategy species. Other categories are for, of course, waterfowl and upland game birds. And if you're interested in it, you can view it at our ODFW headquarters in Salem on public viewing at 12:30 to 3 p.m. on November 4th, which is a Saturday. So if you're interested in going to there. I have the privilege of being one of the judges this year, and I'm really looking forward to it. So, and then for those of you maybe online, we are seeking nominations. The Columbia River Fishery Advisory Groups, ODFW is accepting nominations for the Commercial Fishing Advisory Group and the Columbia River Recreation Fishing Advisory Group. So commercial and recreation. These 2 groups meet 2 to 4 times per year and develop recommendations for salmon, steelhead, sturgeon, smelt in the Columbia River. And nominations will be accepted through November 3rd. You can find more information by going to the ODFW website. And if you can't find it there, you can always get a hold of me at marklabhart@gmail.com and I can get you there. So we want to make sure that we have, sometimes we have trouble getting people on advisory committees because people are very busy and they don't know what it means and those kind of things. I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Again, Columbia River Fishery Advisory Group, both recreation and commercial. We need memberships. The Oregon Hatchery Research Center Board is seeking new members to represent sport anglers. So if you're a sport angler of any kind, doesn't matter whether you're salmon or crappie or bluegill or whatever, we're seeking members from the sport angler groups to be on the Hatchery Research Center. The board is charged with advising the Hatchery Resource Director on operations, budget, and research priorities. It's an internationally recognized center for fisheries science research. And if you're interested in that, just Google Oregon Hatchery Research Center. So if you're interested in applying for that, please do so. And last but not least, we're updating 2 plans. One is our mule deer plan. For those of you who don't know, mule deer are in a significant decline throughout the western United States. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. We have been in the process over the last year of providing webinars about the various chapters in this mule deer plan. We've got one coming up on the 24th. That's tomorrow. Is that today? Yeah, tonight. There's one on predators and how predators affect mule deer. So we're updating that plan. If you're interested in providing some input into that plan, you can go to the ODFW's website and just Google mule deer plan there and provide comments for that plan. And then we are beginning the process to update our wolf plan. Not controversial at all, by the way. So, that plan is due to be updated in 2024, so we are beginning the process of updating that plan. And for those of you who have been watching the press lately, the state of Colorado passed an initiative petition a year or so ago to reintroduce wolves to the state of Colorado. They were extirpated many years ago, and the citizens want wolves to be introduced. And so Colorado has been reaching out to states and federal agencies about the reintroduction, and Oregon has agreed to send them 10 wolves. And so we're in the process of working through that process right now. They will most likely come from Northeast Oregon, and the Colorado will be totally responsible for coming up and collecting them. And of course, we're going to be working very closely in collaboration with them for the reintroduction of those 10 wolves to the state of Colorado. And then, I don't know if many of you know Debbie Colbert or not. Debbie is our deputy for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. She's taken a special assignment on a temporary basis to help in the governor's natural resource office with Jeff Huntington with some of the backlog issues that they're having there. So Debbie will be there for several more months, and then she'll come back to the agency. So if you see Debbie out and about with some of your natural resource agencies, that's because she's helping with the governor's office to try to help them with their backlog. So, end of report.
Thank you, Mark. Kelly, please.
Bedu, Kelly Coates Kuriitka, Nahangyudana Aite. Good day, Kelly Coates is my name, and I'm of the Cow Creek Umpqua people, and I am the Director of Natural Resources for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and I am the tribal representative on the OWEB board. That introduction, I need to find a space to take a breath with that one. So I have a few updates for folks today. As we updated you, I think Mark and I both did at our July meeting, all 5 Western Oregon tribes now have MOAs in place with ODFW. It's a pretty historic landmark. Tribal staff are working diligently to provide opportunities for their respective memberships and are partnering with ODFW on projects that benefit Native species and their habitats through these MOAs. So really good work happening there. Tribes are also tracking the proposed Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM, offshore wind energy developments off of the southern Oregon coast. Some of you might be familiar with that. The Grand Ronde Tribe hosted the Oregon Tribal Environmental Forum, or OTEF, in early October. This is an annual gathering of tribal staff that work on natural resources. The meeting included updates from DEQ and EPA, as well as a field tour, I believe, Lindsay, of the Noble Oaks project that you led. That's correct. This forum provides tribal staff the opportunity to meet one-on-one, share projects, and discuss issues facing tribal environmental staff. I want to let folks know about a funding opportunity. So I wear a handful of hats at any given time during the day. And one of those hats is the tribal co-chair for the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative. And on an annual basis, we get funding through our National Fish Habitat Partnership, as well as the Bonneville Power Administration. And so right now we have a funding opportunity open. It's our BPA funding. Proposals are due soon. They're due October 27th, and this is for projects within the Columbia River Basin that benefit lamprey. So if you are interested or know someone who might be interested in this, you can go to pacificlamprey.org and click on the little funding tab and get more information. Later on, we will also have, I believe in early 24, we will be having a call for proposals for the National Fish Habitat Partnership funding as well. The annual State Tribal Summit will be in December 5th and 6th at Seven Feathers Casino Resort in beautiful Canyonville, Oregon. And it will be hosted by the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. And then lastly, I wanted to call to attention a September 27th White House memo on restoring healthy and abundant salmon, steelhead, and other native fish populations in the Columbia River Basin. The memo recognized the native fish as, quote, essential to the culture, economy, and way of life of tribal nations in the region. It calls for a sustained national effort to restore healthy and abundant native fish populations in the basin. It recognized the federal trust and treaty responsibility to tribal nations to work toward effective, creative, and durable solutions informed by, my favorite part, indigenous knowledge to restore healthy and abundant fish to the basin. The memo goes on to include a charge to federal agencies to review programs to help achieve this goal and set up an intergovernmental partnership. So it is my sincere hope that this memo and call to action can further the work that tribes, OWEB, and other partners are doing in the Columbia Basin to recover fish populations and sustain the traditional lifeways of so many tribes. That's my report.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to go to our virtual world and Eric Murray. What would you like us to know today?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. Eric Murray, representing NOAA Fisheries. I'd like to start off with an announcement of our NOAA's West Coast Region first private forestry HCP in Oregon, and that is with Port Blakely. And this provides a new conservation framework for about 30,000 acres of private forest land in Oregon. and is expected to improve habitat for Chinook salmon, coho salmon, and steelhead. And we'd like to applaud our partners, Port Blakely, on this great accomplishment. Following up on what Kelly just mentioned, on September 27th, the president signed a memorandum prioritizing restoration of healthy and abundant populations of salmon, steelhead, and other native fishes in the Columbia River Basin. And in the memorandum, the administration is stressing its commitment, as Kelly mentioned, to honor the United States obligation to tribal nations. And in so doing, the administration intends to protect and restore America's natural wonders for future generations while recognizing the important co-benefits the Columbia River provides to communities and businesses throughout the region. And the last item that I'll mention is on September 25th, NOAA Fisheries West Coast region gave an update on RecFin, and that is the Pacific Coast Recreational Fisheries Information Network. And they released a plan outlining regional priorities to enhance recreational fisheries management and science guiding recreational fisheries along the West Coast. And their plan is now available on the NOAA Fisheries West Coast region website. And that is what I have for this morning.
Thank you, Eric. I am going to go to Gary next, please.
I'm sorry, I just said you're mixing it up, keeping us on our toes this morning.
Thank you, Barbara. Gary Marshall, member at large from the eastern part of the state. Just want to let all other board members know that I really enjoy this part of the meeting. It's really informative, learn what's going on around everybody's region. So, and I look forward to meeting some of you face to face that I haven't been able to. I feel like a new board member. So looking forward to this meeting. Thank you. So there's a lot going on over in my region, Harney County, Malheur, that area that pertaining to sage grouse and to also wetlands improvements. A lot of projects that are moving along. There's been funding come in. High Desert Partners is the recipients of a lot of this available money out there, and have places to put it. Don't necessarily have the people available to administer it, but it's a good thing. So that's moving along real well. Malheur Lake, if you've been watching that over the years, we've had carp problems there, and it's been kind of a disaster. But we went through some years of drought, and it dried back, nearly dried up, and carp populations have dropped. We got some good winter moisture over there. Snowpacks have filled the lake back up somewhat, and then we've received some nice rainstorms through the summer. Pacific Storm Hillary, we got in the tail end of that, and so things are really looking good. And the lake is clear. There's a lot of vegetation out there that's it's going to help with the turbidity. So that's a good thing going. Finished up one of the High Desert Partners initiatives, received grant funding from Oregon Department of Forestry for some wildfire work on the Stinking Water Mountains, and it was used mostly for invasive species and sage grouse improvement. So that was a good thing there, and possibly more to come on that. So that's all I have. Thanks, Barb.
Thank you, Gary. Lindsay, what do you want us to know today?
Good morning, Lindsay McClary, Public at-Large voting member. I live in West Salem and work for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde in the Natural Resources Department. Wanted to take a minute and just say we had a great meeting in Sisters in July and wanted to thank folks for attending online and in person, providing comments and having good conversations at the reception. I thought the reception was really well attended. Since then, I've attended the Grants Committee meeting in September, but I was on travel and missed the Climate and Water Committee meeting. I attended the ODFW Commission meeting on August 4th for the Grand Ronde MOA. I attended the Council of Water Leaders meeting in Salem also in August. This group meets quarterly to share information on actions within the Santiam watershed, and I provided a short presentation on tribal projects along the North Santiam River. The Polk County Fair was held also in August, and I attended in support of the Soil and Water Conservation District to help provide information and resources to the public. I had the opportunity to attend a conference called the Tribal Climate Camp, and that was hosted by the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians on the Olympic Peninsula also in August. It was a week-long workshop discussing climate change, anticipated impacts, current science and observations, and focused a large portion of the time for assisting tribes in developing a climate resiliency plan. It was really well attended by over 21 tribes stretching from the southwest part of the United States up through Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, and Montana. It's an annual conference available to tribes, and the next one is anticipated for August of 2024, and Grand Ronde has been asked to host. The site may be at Silver Falls State Park and Conference Center. Recently, I've been involved with the Little Butte Oak Initiative FIP managed by the Klamath Siskiyou Oak Network, both as a partner on calls and in working groups, and as part of the technical review team. We just had a great site visit 2 weeks ago in Medford, and they've broadened their working group to be called the Upper Rogue Oak Initiative to capture additional projects and funding across the landscape. I recently attended the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde's annual History and Culture Summit, which is a conference hosted by our cultural resources staff. It's an opportunity for federal, state, local, and non-governmental partners to learn about our history, our culture, our government, and the consultation process. As Kelly Coates mentioned, I did attend OTEF, and we toured our Noble Oaks Conservation Property. We got to see an oak restoration project in process that's funded by OWEB, and it's a partnership with the Nature Conservancy as well as Lomacotsi Restoration Project. I've had a couple good meetings with OWEB staff to talk about a few topics, including the use of the word stakeholder, which we'll get to hear a little bit more about today, an opportunity under telling the restoration story to highlight a project funded by OWEB for almost a decade, and some great conversations regarding acquisition grants. I wanted to take a minute and highlight a tribal restoration summit that's happening next month, November 14th through 16th in Sun River. It is hosted by and put on by Lomacotsi Restoration Project through their Intertribal Ecosystem Restoration Partnership. It's a peer-to-peer learning summit, and it's intended to elevate tribal partnerships in collaborative forest and watershed restoration. It is by invitation only, but if folks are interested in learning more, I'm happy to have some conversations. And then finally, as already mentioned, I'll be traveling to DC with OWEB staff to meet with federal agencies to talk about grants, capacity, and needs also next month. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I am going to go online quickly, Bruce, I'm going to go to Dan Shively. What do you want us to know today?
Excellent. Thanks, Barbara, and good morning, board members and staff. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Dan Shively, representing the U.S. Forest Service, non-voting member. to OWEB board. So just a few quick updates this morning. First off, I really regret and apologize not being together with you there in person. I was so excited to be in Klamath Falls with you and join in the field tour. So my regrets and apologies. I have to be at another meeting tomorrow down in Sacramento, so I'll miss you tomorrow as well. A couple quick personnel updates. We have finally, after about a year, working with two critical leadership positions in our director area and natural resources, filled two assistant director positions. One is being filled by Kevin Ford. Kevin comes over to us from the BLM. Kevin will be our new assistant director of forest products and vegetation management. And then also Ryan Gordon, and that name might be familiar to many of you. Ryan Gordon will be joining us as our new assistant director for biological and physical resources. Ryan comes to us from the Oregon Department of Forestry. He's there as the chief of the planning division on Cal's executive team. And many of you might know him in one of his previous roles, working as the executive director for the network of Oregon Watershed Councils a while back. Two quick updates of relevance, touching on items, topics that haven't been mentioned thus far by some of my colleagues. The Forest Service has stood up Northwest Forest Plan Federal Advisory Committee. That committee has met once in person to date, I believe twice virtually. Yesterday, I think, was their second virtual meeting that I attended. They're meeting next in person in Seattle the week of November 13th. That committee was convened to help provide guidance on the agency preparing amendments to the Northwest Forest Plan to address issues such as climate change, increasing wildfire, and equity and tribal representation and social issues implementing the plan. And then lastly, the Forest Service is continuing its work with the Environmental Protection Agency at the regional level, Region 10 in Seattle, covering both states of Oregon and Washington, and working with state agencies, including ODF, ODEQ, Washington Department of Natural Resources, Washington Department of Ecology, to address issues surrounding smoke management, air quality, and the need for increasing efforts around prescribed burning. It was touched on earlier by some of the colleagues, our effort and work around reducing hazardous fuels in the national forests and adjacent forests too. So we're working closely with the states to see what we can do around improving opportunities for doing more prescribed burning into the future, while at the same time safeguarding human health and safety through air quality management. That's it. End of report. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Dan. Bruce, please.
Thank you, Barbara. My name is Bruce Buckmaster. I'm from Astoria, Oregon. I am honored to be one of the public at large members of the board. A number of years ago, I was told that it is impossible to be angry and grateful at the same time. So I will just share, since I don't serve on any other boards, I will share some of the things that have happened since the last meeting that I'm grateful for. Certainly yesterday's, I want to acknowledge the incredible volume and amount of work that went into preparing for yesterday's meeting. And I'm grateful to Audrey and Eric for so ably presenting it to us. On the 18th, I was honored to join Stephanie for an OWEB 101 presentation to the Oregon Racial Justice Council's Environmental Equity Committee. She did a great job providing them with an overview of our draft equity statement and resolution. Their question and answer session was helpful, and I'm looking forward, they promised they would get us written feedback. One of the comments that really inspired me was from their co-chair, Tiffany Monroe, when she mentioned that OWEB's important and central role as, and quote, a driving force for collaboration with various agencies and as a platform for equity. This reinforced my personal feelings about collaboration and why our DEI EJ resolution is so important. I audited the Zoom training for the climate evaluation criteria and was really impressed with the presentation and the responses to feedback. Thanks to Jesse and the Erics for the great work. And on a surprising gratitude, as I stroll through the Astoria Sunday Market, which is ended now for the season, and I always tell Mrs. B I'm going to get vegetables and things, and I always come back with caramel corn, but I don't know why. But over the summer, I noticed booths. Mechanicum Watershed Council had a great booth, people staffing, answering questions about watersheds and the work they do. Another week, North Coast Watershed doing the same thing. And so that outreach and the chance to talk to the volunteers who are working for those watershed councils in my backyard was something I'm truly grateful for. I'm sure it's happening all over the state, but I'm just going to brag about my home team. So, and lastly, I would like to do a web page shout out and to OWEB and the work. And I doubt that it's the work of only one person, but I know that there are the people who are working on it and who is in charge, Linda, and the work she is doing. So the website landing page no longer looks like or acts like it's designed solely for grant writers. And that's great. Whoever found the video on what is a watershed managed to find the best one available on the web. And it's geared for all audiences and it's very concise. Wonderful addition. Putting the climate water resources under the resources tab, that's a great start. So what I view as somewhat of a lot of information, but somewhat of a clunky website is evolving into a very user-friendly, outward-facing website. And I'm grateful for it so far, and I look forward to additional good work. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Bruce. Meg, please.
Thank you, Barbara. That sound okay? Okay. Water Resources Department and Commission are up to our necks in groundwater at the moment. So I just wanted to run through what's been happening on that front. The commission just adopted rules for revising processes for establishment of critical groundwater areas, which are, it's kind of a management tool that's been on the books forever in Oregon, and it can kick in, the establishment of such an area can kick in when things are pretty dire from a groundwater perspective in a basin. And so this round of rules that we just adopted have to do with the processes for doing that. Processes is there's a process to establish a critical groundwater area. And then if you wanted to apply corrective actions to existing water uses, the department has to do a contested case hearing. So it's a pretty elaborate process to actually affect existing groundwater users. But it's theoretically possible if the situation is dire enough. So that's one thing that just happened at our last meeting. The second item is another rulemaking that's underway in the Harney Basin. And Kearney Basin has surface water issues as well, but the groundwater issues is what I'm like to focus on for a minute today. There's rulemaking underway there to potentially establish a critical groundwater area or a serious water management problem area, which is another mechanism that can be used for a basin that's having groundwater challenges. Similar things are happening in the Walla Walla Basin. But in Harney, I think the hope is to use, it's kind of, we've talked about this before, and the basin has been actively dealing with the groundwater issues for years. But in this rulemaking, I think the hope is that it'll result in a combination of kind of voluntary and regulatory tools available. Under consideration are a critical groundwater area and the Swampa. And I think from a voluntary perspective, or the hope is that the establishment of critical groundwater area would incentivize voluntary actions, which would be the PrEP program that's getting underway there. And also there's a mechanism in Oregon law for voluntary agreements among groundwater users to voluntarily reduce use. And it's there, but it hasn't really been used. And the basin is very interested in seeing if it can be used and can work, and so is the department. So that'll be happening as that rulemaking continues. And then the last item is a rulemaking that is underway having to do with allocation of groundwater generally. And that there's been a rules advisory committee working for, I think, almost a year now on these draft rules. And they're designed to kind of step back and change the way we're allocating groundwater, because in terms of, how do I say this, kind of rethinking how we treat water being available when a request comes in for a new water right. And the new rules are designed to, or the hope is to protect existing groundwater users and also deal with the effect of groundwater use on surface water, which is significant throughout the state. So the new rules are getting a lot of attention. I mean, they're very controversial, is to be expected, because they would significantly reduce the amount of groundwater that is available for new uses in the state. And we're hearing a lot from the municipalities in Central Oregon who are really concerned about their long-term planning. And so the rulemaking is marching along. The commission is really just getting to see the rules now. And we asked for them to be developed, but we're just getting to see them. We've got meetings coming at which we're going to be talking about them, processing them, coming up with a with a set of rules eventually. And so we'll see where that lands. We're also revising the integrated water resources strategy, which applies to all of the agencies in the state that touch on water. I'm hoping that we're going to be hearing from department people maybe at our next meeting, because the staff have been making the rounds to other boards and commissions that are affected, and we certainly are by that. And then the last thing is that I've been chairing Water Resources Commission for almost 6 years, and I decided I wanted to stop chairing the commission. So that kind of process has been underway, and we have a new chair. The governor has appointed Eric Quemps, who's the director of the natural resources for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. He's been on the commission for a long time. Some of you probably overlapped with Eric on this board. He was co-chair, and he's just a terrific choice. And so anyway, I'm really thrilled that he's going to be taking over, or he is now officially taking over the position. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Meg. Amy, are you ready, or do you want me to skip over? Okay, awesome. And then at the, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and then your report, please.
Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, board. Good morning, audience. My name is Amy Hendershot. I'm representing United States Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service here in Oregon. Thank you for the warm welcome. I am excited to hear about all the incredible work that is happening around this table. And I love that I can see our agency's reflection in almost every single thing that I've heard today. So I'm looking forward to getting more into the weeds with each of you and figuring out how NRCS can continue to elevate our partnerships. So like I said, my name is Amy Hendershot. I am replacing Corey Owens in this capacity. I'm unsure how long I will remain in this capacity. We're in a large state of flux internally with NRCS here in Oregon. As you may know, our state conservationist, Ron Alvarado, who led the helm of our agency here in Oregon for a very long time, retired in September. So far, the search for a new state conservationist has not been fully successful. They have not found a candidate they feel suitable for filling Ron's shoes. So until then, we're under an interim directorship by Jay Gibbs. He is from our Hepner office. He is retiring in December. So we will be under a second interim director after Jay's retirement. So a lot of change happening. As well, Corey Owens has taken another position, and there's just a lot of turnover and flux going on within our agency internally, which I'm sure to my federal partners is something they see it happening as well. So a little bit about me. I've worked for NRCS for 15 years. I'm a newcomer to Oregon from the great state of Washington State, so not very far. I don't have Pacific Northwest is definitely my home. I'm not going very far. I worked in Washington State for NRCS for 15 years. Prior to that, I worked for a soil and water conservation district. So I have that perspective, collaborated with our tribal nations very heavily in that role for petroleum, resilience, and independence, and conversion to biodiesel using agricultural fuel stock. So I'm looking forward to getting to know tribes here as well. Prior to that, I worked for Washington State University, where I did agricultural research and soil health, which was really being pioneered at that time about 20 years ago. So very excited to bring that knowledge here to Oregon. So that's a little bit about me. Grew up on a small farm. And proud to say agriculture is agriculture. So if you practice agriculture, no matter what it looks like and where you are, we are here to serve you. And goes for everyone in the audience as well. So I don't have, what I wanted to go over today was some of our end of year, fiscal year accomplishments that our agency achieved because of the partnerships at this table. We accomplished an unprecedented level of conservation, spent an unprecedented level of money directly towards conservation on agricultural lands, tribal lands. And I want to give a shout out to our private landowners who have been stewards of the land that we help them steward through our programs, as well as tribal nations who have been stewarding those lands for millennia. I don't have those lists, but I do want to say it is unprecedented, and we could not have accomplished it without the partnerships that are represented here at this table and those that are not represented here. Our budget for FY24 is massive. Our regular allocation is upwards of 70 million, and IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, will be getting on top of that, is 32 million directly to financial assistance to our agricultural customers and conservation community. It's a massive influx, and we will be leaning in hard to our partnerships to leverage and get that conservation on the ground here in Oregon to achieve our goals, our collective goals. We cannot hire our way out of this. And so, like I said, we'll be looking to leverage our existing partnerships and then build new partnerships, both with new conservation entities that we have not partnered with before, leveraging our existing partnerships, and keeping in mind our three tenets, which under our current leadership are urban, agriculture, equity, and climate. 32 million of that 62 million, which will be direct financial assistance to our agricultural community, will go towards climate supported agricultural practices. So half of those dollars are already essentially, we have earmarked them here in Oregon for climate supported agriculture. We've developed a strategy for how we will execute that, and that's available on our website if you're interested. We will also be prioritizing, in addition to climate this year, source water protection to get at some of the concerns we heard about with our fisheries, as well as source water protection for drinking water, water quality, and water quantity, which is reflected in a lot of the comments I've heard today. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Amy. Jamie, what do you want us to know?
Well, good morning, everyone. Jamie McLeod-Skinner, public member at large for the board, also co-chair of the Water and Climate Committee with Bruce. Welcome, Amy, and I really appreciate your comments because I've been thinking kind of bigger, kind of more philosophically about some things, and you captured a lot of the tangibles. I really appreciate that. Usually we report out on specific activities, but the review of the public comment letters and the project evaluations and yesterday's discussion of our strategic plan have really got me reflecting on the big picture of what we do, what we invest in to achieve OWEB's mission to protect and restore healthy watersheds, natural habitats, and support thriving communities and strong economies. So ultimately, we invest in people and projects to reestablish and sustain healthy watersheds. And I love being a part of it because our natural environment is so central to our health and our economy and our heritage. And how many of us even identify ourselves as Oregonians. And as we review our strategic plan and proposed projects, I'm very mindful of the changes happening around us, from the changing climate to growth and development, and also the importance of thinking long-term. And I'm mindful of building up the foundation for continuing OWEB's work and achieving our mission in the future. Part of that foundation is supporting the established expertise for this work that we're working with now. And also part of it is growing the expertise in organizations and people newer to it and communities newer to this work. Engaging others to invest in this work, whether to leverage essentially some of their resource and their expertise, whether they don't yet prioritize watersheds in the same ways we do, or whether they value our natural environment in ways we don't yet understand. As we discussed during our strategic plan update, as we were discussing it, I was reflecting on the tension between continuing what we've done in the past and opportunities to grow our stewardship partnerships within the confines of our limited resources, whether to kind of lean in or lean back from those opportunities. And I'm specifically thinking about the opportunity to leverage these other resources, perspectives, investments to protect our watersheds by being open to broadening our perspectives. That's both energizing because we're able to share what we do and what we love doing. I mean, that's why we do it. But it's also sometimes a little bit scary because when you bring in different perspectives on what it means to achieve our mission, it can look a little bit different from how we're used to seeing it and or how we've seen it in the past. And so as we reflect on that, I just want to say how much I appreciate both this board and the OWEB staff, and that we continue to be open to understanding different perspectives, welcoming them in and bringing them into what is essentially collaborative work. Because ultimately that is central to us achieving the mission now and in the future of OWEB's mission. So really excited about this work, and thank you all.
Thank you, Jamie. Stephen.
Yeah, first I want to thank Jamie for those comments. It was well thought out. I really enjoyed them. I'm Stephen Brandt. I'm a fisheries professor at Oregon State and representing Oregon State University Extension on the board. Now, in the interest of time and recognizing that all of you are not Beaver football fans, I won't mention how well they're doing or how beautiful and fabulous the new stadium looks, or that they have a 6-1 record, and as of yesterday, I ranked 11th in the country.
Go Ducks.
Moving on to my report. We're going to see the Klamath Dam removal this afternoon. I wanted to point out, I found it, Oregon State University actually has a website called the Klamath Dam Removal Experts. And what this is a list of 9 faculty on campus that have had, and elsewhere, that have had up to 20 years experience and on Klamath, on the Klamath system and the Klamath Dam removal. And they're listed faculty members, a short bio of what they do and what their expertise is, and their email. And they've opened themselves up to answer any questions from the public or anyone else. And I won't go through all of their stuff, but they cover basically the wide range of things you might be interested in on this particular topic. Just some of the topics are salmon disease in the Klamath River, and I'm just touching on a few of the water quality issues, fish pathogens and parasites. One name is Brian Charlton, who's the director of the Klamath Basin Research and Extension Center based in Klamath Falls. Works on irrigation and crop water use and agronomy. Again, fish ecology, water resource allocation, human dimensions, challenges faced by irrigators, farmers and ranchers in the Upper Klamath Basin, their, again, fish diseases, and the actual expertise on water resources engineering, dam removals, reservoir operations, and the like. So if you just go and look for Klamath dam removal experts at OSU, and you'll find that page. The second item is just an update on the Elliott State Research Forest. I know this is a topic that we have talked about on the board before, and this is the, I think it's 83,000 acres that have been given over largely to OSU to manage and conduct the research on the forest in collaboration with the Oregon Department of State Lands. And they have made some progress on that, and one of the purposes, or the main purposes, is to establish a long-term research forest, and I'm quoting, that will provide knowledge to support conservation, education, tribal cultural values, recreation, local economies, and more. And what they just came out with a draft forest management plan, which is currently open for public comment until I think November 8th. The plan itself is very extensive. It's over 800 pages long. And so I have not read it. But I did want to point out that there are some things in here that some of the board members might be interested in, just dealing with some of the topics. And I'll just look at the some of the chapters on managing a research forest for multiple values, research, conservation, education, and recreation. There's a chapter on, of course, chapters on many of the critters being looked at, but also one specifically on climate change, adaptive silviculture, and forest carbon, which reviews sort of climate smart forestry and looking at carbon sequestration and things like that. And that might be a chapter in particular that might be of interest to our climate initiative or to some of the restoration efforts. There's chapters on monitoring and adaptive research strategy, disturbance, and those sorts of things. So if you have the time, you could go and look at that and just see if there's anything that might be of value in some of the work you're all doing. Another topic is Oregon State University did set a record for research income this past year, fiscal year ending in June 30th, $480 million. That's the largest ever received. 90% of that, almost 90% of that is federal monies. And and I won't go into the various types of projects, but one of them is partnering with the Pacific Northwest potato industry and Native American tribes. They received $50 million from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to find practical ways for farmers to more widely use climate-smart farming practices to improve soil health. So that's just like one of the projects. I know we've talked a little bit about earthquakes here, and another one of the projects is money from the U.S. National Science Foundation. It's $15 million over 5 years to the Cascadia Regional Earthquakes Science Center. And this is actually a multi-institution, 14 institutions involved in trying to look at earthquakes, and particularly the foundational science, the community collaboration as well, to translate and communicate the center's findings, and then recommendations for improving earthquake resilience in community, businesses, and infrastructure of the Northwest. So you might be interested in that. And the last one is a little sensitive. It's the creation of what's called the Agri-Stress Helpline. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week stress line, which is dedicated to serving the agricultural and forest communities, which includes farms, farm workers, ranchers, fishermen, foresters, and their families. This was money that was passed by the state legislation, given to Oregon State University Extension Service to help develop this Agri-Stress Hotline, which is the 7th state in the nation that has this. And the folks on that hotline have over 300 hours of training. And this is a coalition of 27 farm groups that helped passage of this bill, as well as the Oregon Cattlemen's Association. And this is in recognition that the mental health of farmers and ranchers is in need of maybe some special consideration, just given the unique circumstances and stresses that those folks might be under. And so, and the suicide rate is actually fairly high amongst farmers. And so this is in recognition of that. It's now live. So, okay, that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Stephen. Liza Jane.
Thank you. I'm okay. I don't need the line right now, but Bruce, I really appreciate you. Carrie, are you okay? Your effort at not being angry with gratitude. I think that's great. If that doesn't work for you, I've found it's impossible to be in a bad mood when you're dancing. So, go ahead and shake your tail feathers if needed. We want you happy. I don't have a whole lot, but a couple things that I've been involved with, it's nationwide, but in Oregon, and there's a new collaborative initiative. It's just getting off the ground. There's room for more people who may be interested. It's regarding wildlife migration. So it is in line with wildlife corridors, but it's more about an effort to reduce vehicle strikes. And I'm involved in that because there's, with ODOT's data and my observational science, there's a stretch of Highway 82 that runs right through our land, and it's called Slaughter Alley locally, but our mule deer populations are just getting wiped out, and that stretch has the most right there in the state. So I'm really excited to try and alleviate that. They work, and it's going to be so much money to create those things, but it's worth what we need to do. Speaking of so much money, that emoji, I think there's like the little face is heads off and is going out the top. Wow. I'm so happy that you all are talking about this, but I hear you say billions, and $1 million is so much. And I hope we do great work. I hope we stretch that just as far as we can on the land and in Oregon. So I think great things will happen, and I'm glad that we have that. It's just, for a rancher, that's mind-blowing information to hear. Another thing that I've been working on is succession planning, and working with the land trust community. I'm part of a 4-year project now with the American Farmland Trust it's called Land Navigators, but it's developing a curriculum for folks around the country to bring landowners and land seekers together and try and keep land in production and not being developed, so around the country. And I think we have 36 different ag trust organizations that applied and were able to then participate in this training to help kind of navigate that for folks. And so that's an interesting, I think, part of what we all do and hope for, and it's really important as well. What else? I'm glad to be here. So great to be in Klamath. I'm really excited to get out and see what's happened around here. I don't think I've been here very often, maybe once. So it's great to see Upper Klamath Lake when I came in, full of water and birds. And so thank you. That's it.
All right, I will wrap us up. Barbara Boyer, I sit here as the representative for the State Board of Agriculture. But I actually come to the State Board of Agriculture as the chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission. So it's a unique role that the state of Oregon provides for the natural resource voice on the State Board of Agriculture. The governor has announced our new director, and excited to have Lisa on board on December 1st. I won't go into any further. I'll let Lisa take that one. I did want you to know that I got to be the welcome to the Oregon State Weed Board, and I got to discuss some of the funding opportunities and partnerships that they could build within the state. They were in Yamhill County, so they asked me to be their welcome. Our local Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District Coalition of Oregon Land Trust hosted a legislative tour on one of our conservation easement properties in Yamhill County. It was very informative, and it was in support of the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. So it was a really great roundtable that we had on one of our properties. What else did I want to say? Oh, and last week I was in Eagle Crest at the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts annual meeting, and Jessie she was part of a panel on carbon. She gave a great talk, just funding opportunities in the future. So we learned about biochar, we learned about all the programs around carbon. So it was a great conference. I did want to stay on Thursday night. I'm the MC of our annual dinner for Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, and we are honoring Chris Seal with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He's been a wonderful partner with Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District. He's one of 220 biologists in the United States who have helped restore over 6 million acres of habitat. Yeah, he's phenomenal. He's been a great partner with our district. So I'm really happy we're going to honor him on Thursday night. And in closing, I wanted to say how much I am loving Terminology Tuesday on a social media. I am learning a lot, and I share it. And then I walk down 3rd Street in McMinnville, and people are like, God, I learned so much from these. So I just wanted to give a shout out there. And then I haven't gotten all the way through the podcast about how to on dam removal. That was part of the social media. It's a local, there's 2 local people that did this whole podcast on the process to get to where they are today with the J.C. Boyle. I forgot where that was shared, but it was somewhere on OWEB's social media. And I think that is all I have today. All right, Liza Jane, you're up.
So we're 10 minutes ahead.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, good.
You guys doing all right? We could take a break because we have 10 minutes on our schedule. Would you all like to take it? Let's take a 10-minute break. Great. There's no coffee.
Just needed the virtual world, you know that.
No coffee for you.
I was thinking.
Thank you. I'd like to invite everybody back to the table. I apologize about no coffee, but we'll be okay.
Yes, I am.
While you're getting to the table, there's something I forgot to tell you, and it's really good news. In Wallowa County, we've gotten so much rain. We got rain in when we never get rain, and it looks like June. It is so green. It almost hurts your eyes. It's just wonderful. And I was able to harvest my buck and my cow elk, and they are so fat, just slick and fat. And all the ones still standing, running, and hopping are slick and fat too. So I really wanted to share that because it's rare. Not the part about the hunting, but the green grass is this tall in October. I know. We're close enough. We'll go. We are now at agenda item C, which is the board chairs are open to a motion. Wait. To accept our July 2023 meeting minutes.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the July 23 meeting minutes.
Thank you, Jamie. The motion's been made to accept. And seconded by Gary. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, motion passes. Thank you.
All right, moving on down to item number D. Actually, that sounds funny. Item number, and then I say a letter. Sorry, it just hit me. So we're now on to general public comment, and we have several people signed up. I am going to call, let's see, are you guys in the room? Andrew's in the room, and Kelly, are you in the room? Okay, right on. Would you two please come forward? State your name and organization for the record, and I will give you each 3 minutes.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here in Klamath Basin in what I think of as one of the most ecologically rich areas of our country, and also culturally rich areas of our country. So it's wonderful to be here in the fall together. For the record, my name is Kelly Beamer. I'm Executive Director of the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. I have the pleasure of serving 31 conservation organizations that work to protect land for wildlife and for people. And I'm here with Andrea today wearing my Oregon Conservation Partnership hat. As you all know, we work together in a statewide partnership that supports watershed councils, districts, and land trusts, those folks on the ground implementing Measure 76. We provide trainings, webinars, community building, and opportunities to lift up the work of voluntary conservation across the state. In that spirit, I wanted to share out a little bit to give you a snapshot of what we've been up to as the Oregon Conservation Partnership. One of the things that is really important, as you all know and will feel this afternoon, is having time on the ground in the geographies where our members are working to touch with projects. And so we hosted a number of community leader tours, legislative tours over the last 3 months. The Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts partnered with the Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District, as Barbara was mentioning, to lead a tour on Crown Hill Farm that was really talking about the importance of our agricultural land base and the incredible fish and wildlife habitat that exists on those lands. We also led a tour in Full Cellar Farm, East Multnomah County. Nicole, thanks for joining from the OWEB team. That was really featuring, an important urban effort to acquire farmland and bring on the next generation and open up access to the next generation of farmers. So there's a strong, very bold and diverse coalition coming together to support the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, which you all have proven and built and made a success in Oregon, and we need it to be continued to be fully funded. And so that will help us leverage NRCS investment in the protection of our agricultural land base and make sure that we don't have to let go of that federal match we've already been successful securing here in Oregon. So that was just a really great set of tours, and I'm going to be providing comment wearing my Colt hat about the strategic plan tomorrow, but at this point I'll pass it over to you, Andrea.
Thank you. It's great for me to be here with you all as well. And I just have to share this with you. The gentleman I was sitting next to at breakfast, when he heard that I was here for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, he said, "Oh, and the water here is great. It's so good." He was from Florida, so, but that made my day, right? So I'm with the Oregon Association of Conservation Districts. I'm also here on behalf of our partnership. So I just wanted to update you on a couple of the things that we've been doing as part of the partnership. As Barbara mentioned, we just had our conference last week at Eagle Crest, and we had 84 attendees, which is probably the most OACD has had in years, although I don't know, since I just started in May, And the substance was great. As you heard, we had biochar. We had a session on siting solar on land, working with landowners as they're going through the decision of whether or not to site solar on their land and all the implications for that. Legislative updates, a workshop on carbon sequestration and soil health, which you funded. It was great. So we just developed our carbon sequestration and soil health guidebook, which I realized I should have brought the thumb drives with me here to share with you, but I'll get them to Nicole so she can get them out to all of you. And I'll just show you it looks like this. It's a web-based, it's really very cool. It's got chapters on defining healthy soils, practices and equipment, financial resources, ecosystems, carbon marketplaces, training, and so on. It's a great resource guide, and we have it in combination with its partner website, which was funded by NRCS. So they work very nicely together. And we also just had a legislative tour down in at Jackson Soil and Water Conservation District on some post-fire, where we're at with some of the South Oban chain in the fire shed there. And we were talking about, you guys were talking about getting the word out. We had press coverage there from the Grants Press newspaper. It was on the front page of the newspaper the next day, as well as coverage from ABC News in Medford, and it was on the news that night. So those types of things, getting folks out. We've actually decided we're going to increase the number of those events we do in the next biennium, in our next grant cycle, because it's a great way to get both our legislators out. We also had 3 legislators there. And we've been doing webinars. You mentioned the PFA grants. We'll be doing one through the partnership, in partnership with ODF on the PFA grants, November 16th. And we did one with American Farmland Trust back in September. So we're continuing all of that work, and I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jamie.
This is actually a question more for Lisa, and we've talked about this before, but great tools like the Soil Sequestration Handbook. Are we able to get that on our website, and how would people find this so we can help leverage some of the great work our partners are doing?
Sure. For the record, Lisa Sharp-Lohansen, Executive Director with OWEB. We can put it on the website as a resource and a link to. We link to many different things, so it's, we can work with you to make that happen. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have, let's see, Katie, you're in person, right? Katie Ryan? Okay, I will call you up next, please. State your name for the record.
Hi, everyone. For the record, my name is Katie Ryan. I'm the Executive Director with the Wetlands Conservancy. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today in the Klamath Basin. I run a 42-year-old land trust. We are a statewide land trust focused on the protection of wetlands and restoration of wetlands in partnership with communities. So really looking at where communities can own their own water quantity and water quality projects. We are based all over the state, but we do own and steward property on the Central Coast and then also in the Portland metro area, some of our smallest wetlands, but take the most energy to maintain. And we are really excited and invested in coming into the Klamath and seeing how we can support wetland restoration and conservation here. Doesn't get much more wetlandy than the Klamath. So I just wanted to introduce myself. Thank you all for being here and for coming down to the Klamath for your meeting. I'm excited for your afternoon visit today to the dam removal sites. Our organization is also a member of the Oregon Land Justice Council, which is a program of COLT, Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. I'm also a board member of COLT. And that project is really focused on working with our Indigenous partners on land back, land access, co-management, if that's the right thing, just really working together with our Indigenous partners on land management. So we're really excited to be a part of that project as well. And yeah, just like I said, wanted to introduce myself, say hello. Thank you all for being here. I'll be at the reception tonight, so excited to talk to folks a little bit more. And yeah, just wetlands opportunity here is incredible. So thank you all.
Thank you, Katie. Any questions? Okay, comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we have one more virtual, and Kristen Waltz. Do we see her?
Hello, can you see me?
Yes, we can, Kristen.
Okay.
So
Good morning. Good morning, members of the OWEB board. My name is Kristen Walls. I'm the executive director at the North Fork John Day Watershed Council in Long Creek, Oregon. But I'm appearing in front of you today as the board chair of the Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, aside members of the Oregon Conservation Partnership. So first of all, I want to thank the board for the opportunity to provide an update and some changes within our organization and what we've been working on for the last year. Most of you may know, or some of you may know, but for some of you that do not, the network is currently going through a leadership transition. Vanessa Green, the face that you have all been familiar with and seen for the last 4 years, as she was NELC's executive director since October of 2019, resigned from her position last month. We were sad to lose Vanessa, but we are excited for her and we wish her the best as she embarks on her new journey. So at this time, you're seeing me, which means we have not hired a replacement. The NELC board is taking a short pause to reevaluate the current structure of the organization, the needs of our members, and how the network can promote and support watershed councils across the state. We anticipate that we will hire somebody within the next 6 months. In the meantime, there is somebody on the other end of the phone or the computer. The NELC board and committees are working together to step in to fill any immediate gaps that may exist with our members, partners, and our funders. Our Member Services Committee, Business Development Committee, and Government Relations Committee remain actively engaged and are stepping up to support the board during this transition. So I wanted to come here today and just highlight 2 things that may be of interest to you all. First is the hard work, and you've heard from the other partners of the Oregon Conservation Partnership with these legislative tours. But the NELC GRC has been working to engage in an organized strategy that leverages strengths of watershed councils and really connects us with our local governments and our communities. So 2023 has been a busy year for the GRC. They provided written and verbal testimony to 10 House bills, met in person with state senators in Salem, and coordinated 2 legislative restoration site tours. So these tours encourage federal, state, tribal, and local representatives to see the work that watershed councils are implementing on the ground with our partners and demonstrate the integral role that watershed councils play in these large-scale restoration and conservation efforts. 2 of the tours were hosted by the Nicanagum Watershed Council in Seaside and Lake County Umbrella Watershed Council in Lakeview. They were both well attended. I should note that there was a 3rd legislative tour that occurred last week that the Coos Watershed Association took the lead on. So although NOWC did not coordinate that specific event, I wanted to make mention of that and thank the partners who made that happen in the absence of a designated director. The second thing that may be of interest to you is that the network is working on our final details of our strategic action plan. Vanessa, the executive committee, and the full board have been working on the development of this action plan prior to Vanessa leaving, and we feel like this is a good time to take a look at prioritizing the action items and sort of strategies that we feel are how we get that work on the ground. So we'll be looking at those action items for the immediate term, the intermediate term, and for the long term. So really focusing on seeing these as making sure that we're really filling these gaps as we are looking for a new executive director. Once we get that SAP, those details lined out, we hope to use it as a tool to engage with our members as we further assess the needs of watershed council statewide and develop a scope of work for this incoming director. So that's really all I have. On behalf of the network, I want to thank the board and the staff of OWEB and for the opportunity for me to talk to you today. You guys are just such amazing partners, and we could not do the work that we do without you. And so I'm sorry that I'm not able to be there in person, maybe next time. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have right now, or I also welcome any of you or anyone to contact us after the meeting for an individual follow-up.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions from the board, so thank you very much. So I do want to acknowledge the 2 written public comments we received that is in our board packet from Charles Rogers from Pipe Fork Land Purchase Assistance and Brenda Smith, DEI and Environmental Justice. Thank you very much for engaging with us today. We appreciate it. So we are a little ahead of schedule, so we thought, Liza Jane and I thought we'd entertain, would we like to take another little break? Does that sound all right, now that there is coffee? Okay.
Let's come back at 10:05.
Most Westerners.
everybody. Let's get back to work. Okay, welcome back. Everybody's refilled, refreshed. It's such a beautiful day outside. We are at letter item E. I'm looking forward to all these great updates. So we'll start with Lisa, please.
Thank you. For the record, Lisa Sharplow-Hansen, Executive Director with OWEB. As I've thought about approaching this quarterly report with the board, I've struggled with how to start it. And so I've decided, I captured a couple of words as I was sitting here. I'm like, it's with gratitude, it's with excitement, it's with anticipation, it's with sadness, and it's with accomplishment. And I think that really captures a lot of what's in my report for all of you. I want to talk about gratitude and accomplishment first. The board passed its first resolution, a little over a year ago for climate. And at the time, it seemed like a big feat to get those rules adopted and in place. Well, rules were adopted in July. Staff have done an absolutely amazing job in this quarter in terms of outreach to our partners and building an understanding of what the climate criteria means in our grant making process moving forward. And all I have heard along the way from the online presentation and then the in-person meetings over the last several weeks is appreciation for the information that's been pulled together to try and help partners come along, an understanding of how they can incorporate the climate criteria into their grant applications going forward. And so that has just been an incredible body of work, and so grateful for staff for trying to make it manageable for our partners in the field. For something, time and space in the beginning, I think everybody was pretty nervous about. So, to Eric and Jesse and others who've worked on it, just a load of gratitude, because it has been absolutely amazing work. Another big lift, big lift, is working on the draft DEI resolution. And you're going to hear more about it from Kelly in her report. But the DEI committee has done amazing work in terms of bringing a draft forward. Staff are doing outreach to different organizations, talking with them about the resolution. And did we get it right? Are we getting it right? Have we hit on the right things to partner with underserved communities and to bring in new partners into OWEB and our grant making? And I think that work will be ongoing for a bit. The conversations have been very, very fruitful and well received. So, thank you to everyone who's been working on that, following it, and helping to lift that work up for the future. In terms of accomplishments, you guys have hit on a couple of big ones. Over the last 2 years, we've worked at modifying and updating the website to make it more user-friendly and bring it along. It's come a long way in a short period of time. Barbara mentioned our social media, and I am so proud of what staff have done in terms of the social media. It's beautiful, it's engaging, and there is a tremendous amount of information there that highlights work as well as the partners. And I think it's an amazing way to share what OWEB is about and what partnerships are about and how that work is being accomplished on the ground and how it impacts Oregonians and really gives them a feel for where their dollars are going in terms of restoration work. on the ground. Another big project that's underway is a revision of our grant application for open solicitation. So we will have another open solicitation period coming up, and our grantees will see a new and revised application. We hope we have streamlined it. Less questions. Staff have worked really hard on trying to reduce the redundancy and help make the application more user-friendly and not as onerous on the front side. And we can collect some additional information if we need it on the backside after the grants are made. There were some limitations in terms of how that could be done because of our computer system, but I think the grantees will really appreciate the work and the time that staff have put into making improvements in that process and helping them along. In terms of other efforts and accomplishments, you may have remembered, we've talked several times here about implementing a new organizational structure that we requested funding for in our agency request budget. Ultimately, it was provided in our legislative budget for 23-25. On October 1, we put that into full effect. And so right now, we've really worked in the organizational structure to redistribute work across 4 managers in the agency. And I think of it as 4 different areas. So there's grants, which Eric Williams oversees. There's monitoring, and Courtney oversees that. There's BizOps, business operations, that Miriam oversees. And then Renee, help me, all of a sudden the name went away. Thank you. Acquisitions and special programs, which is all coming together. And we really worked at bringing bodies of work together that made sense. So far, so good. It's been well received by our partners as well as staff. And the feedback has been, it's made a difference in terms of managing workload and providing access to managers and more time for the managers to work with staff. So thank you, to everybody who worked on that, and thank you for the ongoing work that's in there coming forward. We also are in the process of hiring. We received several limited duration positions in our agency request budget. One of them that's right on the cusp is the federal position. And you may remember, we receive funding through cooperative agreements through USDA, NRCS, as well as BLM. And they are paying each for half a position to help us with that work in OWEB for the work that we do for them. And that position is very close being hired, as well as then several others that go with new programs that are in the written reports. And so we're moving along there. Focused investment partnerships. We spent a big chunk of time over the last year, again, looking at DIPS and the process and what the next offering was going to look like. That offering closed a couple of weeks ago. We received 5 applications for the next round of FIPS, and you all will be taking that work up soon. I think in terms of partnerships, you've heard a little bit about some of the work, and there's been around the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. You may remember we had positions funded in our budget to continue the work from last biennium and get those grants in place, but there wasn't a new investment made for additional grants into the future. The partners have done an amazing job in the last quarter in terms of providing opportunities to bring the legislative leadership together to explain the importance of working lands and how it benefits Oregonians, how it benefits the land, and how we open up opportunities for the next generation of farmers that are coming in by using the tools that are provided in the Ag Heritage Program. Stephanie has been asked to participate in a legislative presentation during the next November legislative days, 6th through the 8th of November, just to do an overview along with a panel talking about the Ag Heritage Program. So we're excited about that and anticipating, based on the work of the partners, that there will be a request for funding in the 2024 legislative session. And I would say, I participated in one of the tours, the legislative reception to the work and gaining an understanding of why the program is so important. It was phenomenal. So I want to say thanks to the partners for all of that, because I'm hoping it's incredibly fruitful in 2024. So thank you for the work and the efforts there. Okay. Transition. It's been 2 weeks since the governor asked me to serve as the next director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And it's been a packed 2 weeks. It was a packed couple of days because it was bumping up against the timeline for getting nominations in for the next confirmation. So the governor has asked me to serve as the next director pending confirmation by the full Senate, November 8th. I will have a hearing in front of Senate Rules on November 6th. Should I be confirmed, we'll cross our fingers and legs and toes and everything else, I will be with the agency until December 1st. And that was the time frame. I wanted to have a longer time frame to transition, knowing we had a board meeting and there's a lot of work to kind of wrap up before that. There is not a plan out there yet for exactly what will happen in terms of the recruitment for the next director. I anticipate there'll be an announcement for an interim director probably around the time of confirmation. The Governor's Natural Resource Office has agreed to meet with staff on November 9th, just to talk through plans and provide reassurance of the commitment for strong ongoing leadership at OWEB and continuity going forward. So a little bit of time before we know exactly what's going to happen, but we're only a couple weeks out. And so in the interim, if anybody needs anything between now and December 1st, I'm still around. I think in terms of just a couple other things, the governor's expectations, we've made great progress in the governor's expectations. We're on target and on time in terms of the work that we've had to complete. We submitted a continuity of operations plan in September. There was a draft DEI plan that was due in June. I think the DEI committee and the board need to look at that draft because it was a plan for a plan. It reflects much of the body of work that we're doing right now, but figure out if it should be a separate plan or incorporated into our strategic plan ultimately. So there's a little more work that needs to be done there. We have a draft succession plan for the agency started and under review with the Department of Administrative Services. We completed our employee engagement survey with Gallup. We're waiting to see the results of that in the next couple of weeks. And so staff, again, are just doing amazing work, and you all are now engaged in terms of the strategic action plan for the agency and setting up the work plan for the next 2 years for how OWEB will collaborate and partner, and partner to get work done on the ground that serves all Oregonians and really makes Oregon a better place. And I think ultimately, with the focus that's been put in place over the last 2 years, will set Oregon up to be more resilient in the long term in light of some of the challenges that we're facing with climate change. So I want to say thank you to the board and to the staff and to the partners for your support over the last 2 years. I'm not the same person that came to OWEB October 1st of 2021. I'm leaving with a completely different perspective around partnerships because OWEB lifts it to a different level. and the opportunities that are out there in terms of working lands. You all have really helped me grow from all of the conversations and exposure and the efforts that you've put in very diligently. And I would also reflect on, I remember when I met the staff just before I started, and a couple of board members attended that meet and greet session and asked me about DEI. And the work that we've done here at OWEB over the last 2 years really has helped me in my DEI journey and thinking more broadly about the opportunity for partnerships with additional communities that I might not have thought about before, and how to outreach and engage with them. And so, I thank you for that opportunity for learning. Those opportunities don't always come along very often. So it's with gratitude that I finish what will be my last quarterly report to this board, and thank you. I'm so keen. You're so keen. Oh, I guess, are there questions about the written reports? Yeah, are there any questions about the written reports? You had several of them in the packet that staff have worked on. You'll learn more about the work in Klamath today, and there's an update on the work that we've been doing with KRRC. There's an update for source water protection in the new legislation that was passed and the work that staff are doing in standing up that program. In your packet, there's an update on the focused investment partnerships and how the team is working to help the grants committee work through those applications in this next round and cycle. There was a new program that was established in terms of grants for strategic implementation areas that are part of the Oregon Ag Water Quality Program that OWEB will be working at providing grants for. And as always, there is an update on the activities that we've been doing in the last quarter that are related to the strategic plan and the work that has been accomplished along the way.
Jamie?
The reports are very informative and appreciate that, but, and Chair, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but given that Lisa was talking about the transition, I just want to say how grateful I am, how you've really, I talked earlier in my comments about creating a culture and environment where we really lean into possibility and challenge ourselves to think and grow, and you've really fostered that here. I'm so appreciative for that. And then also, you've impacted our committees, and now they are public and open to the public, and that was something that wasn't reflected on before, and you brought that reflection. So the improvements and the really leaning into with the structural staff and caring about staff, those are details that you've worked on, but I know that's been something you've really brought to the organization. And then just to say, public service is, I fear at times that public service, which is really much harder than people who don't do it understand, I fear it's becoming a lost art. And you are someone who really exemplifies and practices that art very well. And so, we're very grateful for the time you've been with OWEB. Also, know this will only expand our partnership and relationship with ODA. And so really, it's a win-win for Oregonians, but we're, sad to see in some ways, but also really excited for the larger picture for the entire state. So I just want to personally thank you so much for the great work you've done.
Thank you, Jamie.
Mark.
So probably the reason the boards aren't saying too much, we had an opportunity last night at dinner to personally thank Lisa for her service. But I'd like to publicly do this so that at least you can hear from me publicly. It's been an honor and a pleasure to have worked with you, Lisa. You said you are better for OWEB. Well, the last 2 years were better because of your service to OWEB. As we've talked on the phone, it's probably great for the Department of Ag and not so great for us, but we'll find another executive director. But yeah, you will be missed by us, and we can't thank you enough for your leadership, your dedication, and your passion for what you've done for OWEB. So thank you.
Kelly.
I just want to say, I want to echo Mark's comments and just say thank you so much. I really appreciate from the tribal perspective all of the work and the outreach that you did initially, meeting with all of the tribes that OWEB works with, and then coming down and meeting with us on our homelands and talking with us about what we do and seeing our lands, and really all of the conversations that we've had. I feel like you've really done a great job of elevating that government to government relationship between the tribes and OWEB. I really appreciate it, and it's been a pleasure working with you on it, and I'm excited for what you're going to do at ODA. But echo what Mark said, it's a loss for OWEB, but just really support you and really want to thank you for everything.
Lindsay.
Just a moment to, for the record, Lindsay McClary, just wanted to echo everybody else's comments. It's, you're leaving big shoes to fill and very impactful work here. So thank you so much for your time, and it is a loss for OWEB.
Bruce?
Well, I'm bereft and a little bit irritated. You know, we just got you where we want you. So I should dance. There's no question. You came here with this wonderful portfolio of knowledge and experience, but I believe it was the first time you began to function as a CEO, a chief executive officer of an entity, and that requires very specific skill sets on how to lead, and working with boards of directors, and the inward facing, outward facing, even more difficult because there's the political aspect of it. So the fact that you have made it where you are in 2 years is simply amazing. And I think it's because we're all such great teachers and a natural aptitude on your part. Anyway, we're sorry to see you go, and we wish you the very, very best. And you have left us better than you found us. Thanks.
Meg?
Gary? Thank you. Everything people have said, of course, but and also I really think that the state is a winner here because of your long history with ag that you brought here to us, and educated us in ways that we might not have otherwise seen things. And now going back to ag with your OWEB knowledge base, I think is going to just be a huge benefit for Oregon. And you've been, excuse me, just delightful as a colleague. And so thank you for everything you've done, and go forth and do great things.
Thanks, Lisa. When somebody voluntarily comes to you and really wants to know what's going on in your area and find out how you're doing things and why and everything, then you really know they care. And you showed us that over there where we're at right off the bat. So I knew right then that you were a great fit for this job. You were another in the line of some great leaders we've had here at OWEB. So you'll be remembered for that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Liz.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty new, but I just want to say a few words. Grace, knowledge, innate sense and just your way that you knew what was needed for a new board member and just reached out way ahead of time before I knew what I needed, you know, to make me feel comfortable and get operational on this wonderful board. Thank you.
Barbara.
So I'm not really sad. Just kidding, just kidding, I'm kidding. I am excited. Sorry. It's just, you know, I don't know, I've known you a better part of 20 years. So to watch you grow in this position and learn, you definitely had a learning curve when you came through the doors of OWEB, but just to see how you absorbed it. And one of the things that you said in your interview was you have a better understanding of natural solutions. And that is really exciting for me for agriculture. So thank you very much. And I get to see you more.
I'm not good at this, but I will say I don't feel, I do feel that I'm not losing you because I think that Oregon watershed enhancement and agriculture is the same. So yay for us, right? In the state of Oregon. And I know that great things are going to happen. I want to tell the staff as well, don't worry. We're here for you. We've done this before and we'll do it again. And you're incredible. You don't need us, but we are here for you as we move through transition. And thank you everybody for always staying a team. You're so respectful to each other, and that's what always you always demonstrate. And I think to the state as a whole that we operate as a team, and we'll continue to do that. So I'm really happy for you and happy for the state. So thank you.
All right, we are moving on down the agenda to F, committee updates. And the first one is Water and Climate Committee. Who is taking that, Bruce or Jamie? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The Water and Climate Committee met on September 13th. We had a very full and rich meeting that is all reflected in the written report. And I, rather than take time now, I just ask you to take a look at that. The Water and Climate Committee going forward is looking at a number of things, including our continuing need to or desire to monitor climate activity in all of its forms with the criteria and application. Further work on 6 PPDQ and how that is going across different agencies, how it might affect our watersheds, and in anticipation of potential projects coming to us. The drinking water source work, coastal wetlands, or coastal watersheds, work being done by Oregon Wild and of all agencies, NASA. Hopefully they will be able to make a presentation to the committee. So the committee works, has many voices that bring information and ideas for gathering additional information. And it's a pleasure for, speaking for both Jamie and I, to work with this group and to see, thought maybe we were kind of slack off after the climate resolution, but doesn't appear to be the case. Thank you.
All right, any questions or comments for the Water and Climate Committee? All right, not hearing any. Dan, would you like to take grants, please?
Sure thing. We had a fascinating conversation about revisiting the name of the engagement grant offering, and I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay to walk us through some of the stuff that she brought up during our grants committee meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. We had a great conversation about changing the grant offering stakeholder engagement to just be called engagement. The word stakeholder can be offensive, and I think that this is especially true when it comes to tribes. The word was historically used during settlement when settlers were staking claims to lands that were historically stewarded by tribes. Using this word now to refer to and include all interested parties perpetuates the wrongdoing of staking land claims and is a painful reminder for tribal nations. Additionally, using stakeholder to refer to tribes fails to recognize sovereignty. I'd like to stop there and see if my colleague Kelly Coates has anything to add as the tribal representative on the board and the co-chair of the DEI committee. But before I do, I'd like to give credit to a few folks. This stakeholder conversation has been ongoing and is far from my own idea. I've simply had the opportunity to make change as a board member. So thank you to OWEB staff, including Ken Fecho and Liz Redon, Eric Williams, and Eric Hartstein. I would also like to thank Jamie Stevens with Klamath Bird Observatory for bringing this up with me.
Kelly Coates for the record. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you very much. I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think it's the right move for all the right reasons. This is something that tribes, I like to call it having educational opportunities with people to educate them on the fact that tribes are not stakeholders. We are governments. We have a government-to-government relationship with federal and state agencies. So changing the name, I think, is a great idea and maybe a bit overdue. But I also want to thank those folks that brought this to everyone's attention and had those hard conversations. Thank you to the staff and the board members that are so cognizant of these things. It's very, very much appreciated from the tribal standpoint. And I just want to thank you all for your work. And thank you, Lindsay, so much.
And it has had ripple effects. So I've been like, oh my God, this word is like everywhere, and trying to figure out how I can remove it from the work that I do at the EPA as well. So thank you. And thanks to OWEB. And just as a reminder, and correct me, Eric, if I get this wrong, but this isn't something that needs board approval. This is a decision that's being made by OWEB in support of this. We did talk about a couple of other things, the open solicitation grant awards, which are going to be discussed today, and there's going to be actions on. And then we talked a bit about the cohort 4 FIP evaluation process. I do encourage folks to read the written material on the dates and how that process is going to move forward. That's in the director updates. Especially if you're on the grant subcommittee. We have set the dates for the information, and we have set the dates for the interviewing of the FIPs, and we would appreciate every member of the grants committee to make sure they are there to participate in that. It was very challenging the last time around with the few of us that showed up, and we need the whole team for that. And that's it. Thank you.
And to follow up on that, and the public took note of that last process too, of how few people were actually there during that conversation. So thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead, Liza Jane has a question.
I'm not sure who to ask. Is it virtual or in person?
We are gonna do in-person meetings. One is a working meeting, it's not a public meeting, but the meeting in March when we're gonna be interviewing the FIP applicants, we're gonna try to do that in person in Salem. I'm looking at Eric for affirmation of that, but.
Thanks for that, Dan. Our plan is to hold the work session virtually and then hold the interview session in person at location to be determined. And we're working towards providing equitable stipends to each applicant partnership to relieve the burdens of travel for those who might be coming from farther away. We heard some feedback from that last time, and we wanted to make sure we're doing that a little bit better this time. So, thank you.
March 12th, yes. Bruce.
Even though it's clear that board approval is not needed or board action is needed for the stakeholder issue, I believe it would be appropriate and certainly in my case desirable for the board to go on record as either supporting the removal and making the changes. If the chairs look around and see general support, that may be asking for acclamation, but I think it should go into the record that the board looked at this, heard it, responded to it, and said, Mike, let's do it.
Go forth.
That's a motion, I second.
What? I don't know the rules, but thank you, Jamie. I don't know if we can even make a motion at this, but.
Because it wasn't an action item on the agenda, I feel like we can't make a motion, but we could have consensus.
A sense of the board, and if we want to do it by acclamation, that would be.
Stephen?
Yeah, I can't vote or make a motion, but I fully endorse the recommendation to change it. And, you know, OSU extension is really part of extension engagement. And so the word engagement is used quite frequently, but if you actually do a search looking for stakeholders, it's no longer being used. It's now called community engagement, if you're going to say that term, or engaged scholarship is another term that's frequently used. So I fully endorse the recommendation.
Good, Jamie.
Can I ask a question? And Bruce, thanks so much for suggesting that. Going back to Lindsay or Kelly, what I heard was also two distinct categories of general input from the community as a whole, and that distinct recognition of the sovereignty of tribal nations, that government-to-government relationship. And so just to clarify, is it just one word replacement, or is it two words replaced that we're bringing in? Because I think there's real power to that separate acknowledgement. So if you could just comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, thanks for that question. So in the grants committee and in talking with committee members and staff, we really felt like we didn't want to change the name, just kind of drop a word. And so engagement can mean a variety of different partnerships and groups. And I do think that OWEB as a whole does do a great job recognizing tribal sovereignty and government to government consultation and relations. So I don't have any heartburn over lumping in this case and not splitting, but recognizing that engagement, grant funding can support grantees engaging with tribes under the engagement umbrella. That's my take on it, but Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jamie. And I fully agree with Lindsay on that. And that's exactly what I was thinking, because these grants are used to engage with partners, right? and tribes are often partners in these grants. So I think it makes sense just to drop the stakeholder and keep the engagement piece.
So thank you very much for bringing this forward. We had this conversation at the executive level at ODA under Alexis Taylor's leadership, and we stopped using it at ODA several years ago. You know, it's a slow process because, as Dan Brown mentioned, it's used everywhere. So, but it was brought to our radar, and it's been on my mind for several years. So I really appreciate bringing it to the grants committee. And aren't we getting a presentation from you about government to government relations at somewhere in the future? I feel like we talked about that in Sisters, right? So we'll touch that, Jamie, we'll touch upon that topic a little bit more in January. And you know, you guys, here we are being leaders of change again. So I really appreciate all of you for engaging in this. It's not easy conversations to have, and that we've built the trust with each other that we can be vulnerable, and I really appreciate that. Meg, you had something you wanted to say?
Kind of related to this. In our strategic plan overview yesterday, we went through slides with a lot of information really fast. But one of the things that I noticed and thought I want to come back to had to do with an observation about the way that we are engaging with tribes, basically. And I wanted to know more about I think it was raised in the weakness category, not in the strength category. And so I wanted to know more about that, basically. And I wasn't sure when the right opportunity would arise to bring this up, but this seems like as good a time as any. And maybe in January, we could do this, kind of talk about that as well. That would be great. Thank you.
Well, and I think the strategic plan's coming back to us again 2 more times.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's not gonna be.
Sorry, Lisa and I were just confirming over here that I think at the January meeting, if that's when I do the government to government overview, it would be great to have Ken. I like to volunteer people who aren't here. If you're listening, Ken, I'm sorry. But I think it would be good maybe for Ken to do an overview of our engagement with tribes. I know he's done this before, but just to give folks a refresher on it. And then that would dovetail really nicely with my presentation as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And something else from the grants committee quickly. One of the things that I think was brought forward, Eric, did I hear this right? In the monitoring grants, there were 110 applications. Did I get that right? Oh, okay. I wrote that down. I'm like, that's a lot. So, okay, I'm wrong. Okay, I don't know where I got that number. Okay. Gotcha. Still a lot. Okay, thank you. So can I just get a head nod from the voters about changing the engagement grant? Just a little consensus. I think we've all pretty much spoken, the voting members. Okay, awesome. We have consensus. Bruce, is that all right?
Yeah, I think we say, in this case, since it is not a vote, I think all members, not just voting
okay.
members, should have the opportunity to make their voices heard. They're not second-class citizens. for crying out loud.
Good point. Thank you.
And I'd like to just add, don't stop here. Our words are powerful, and they express our beliefs, and this reflects, I believe, the beliefs of OWEB really well, but don't stop here. So keep us and everyone learning about those. Thank you.
Great segue into our next committee report, DEI. Who's taking that one? Oh, Kelly, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, Barbara, that was my thought as well. Great segue. You guys set us up so well for that transition. So Dan Shively and I co-chair the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Environmental Justice Committee. Dan, would you like me to run through things and then feel free to jump in?
You bet. Thanks, Kelly.
Sure. Okay, so the DEI committee, DEI and EJ committee met on September 5th, 2023. And I'll run through kind of quickly what we went over at the meeting. And then I have some specific things to talk with you all about as well. So OWEB staff provided an update on the work of the Environmental Justice Council. OWEB staff connected with Wild Rivers Coast Alliance, Say Hey, Meyer Memorial Trust. They're continuing to do active engagement. OWEB staff provided an update on government-to-government outreach. As I mentioned before, Lisa and Stephanie and Ken came down and met with the Cow Creek Umpqua tribe, toured some of our restoration projects and our lands. We talked through lands that were restored to us in 2018. And I think we had some really great conversations about the government-to-government conversations, getting out on the landscapes, meeting tribes where they are, so you can see the lands that we're working in, because we have so many unique landscapes in Oregon. And we talked through some of the roadblocks that we have, which are going to be different for each tribe, and how we creatively get around those roadblocks. And how we do what we do. Committee members recommended continuing the government-to-government outreach efforts to tribes, and going out and meeting with tribes on the landscape as well. So I think that is a great effort that is going to be great to continue, and we're just going to keep learning. Let's see, we reviewed information on the co-chair election process, so I'll get back to that in a minute. We reviewed the latest equity statement and resolution, recommended a few additional edits. The updated statement and resolution are attached in your board packet, and I want to quickly go over that with you all. So, and I have to thank Stephanie for the prep work for this report, and all the work that you've put into this. Thank you, and all the staff that have helped out with that. This has really been a team effort. The draft equity statement and resolution reflects over a year of work by the board and the DEI, Environmental Justice, and Government-to-Government Committee. After our July 22nd board meeting in Enterprise, we worked to develop the resolutions. We've been working hard. We decided it was ready to share with the full board for discussion. The committee also asked staff to gather feedback on the resolution and to reach out to the Environmental Justice Council for feedback as well. The document begins with a brief draft equity statement. The statement expresses shared values of the board and staff. And then there's the draft resolution that has several sections. The resolution is a statement of the board policy and intent. So a couple different things there. I'm going to walk through the sections of the draft resolution briefly. There's a background section that acknowledges the things the board members individually and collectively have learned along our DEI journeys and life experiences. It addresses cumulative and combined effects of racism, dispossession, exclusion, environmental damage, and climate change to communities of color and Indigenous communities. The resolution is in two parts. The first, be it resolved part, is aspirational and reflects the board's intent. The second part, the be it further resolved part, includes several specific actions and strategies that the committee identified. So I am going to quickly read our equity statement. And I have to think, there was a lot of really great discussion at our July meeting about this. And I have to thank Liza Jane for your comments on this, and Bruce for all the work that the two of you really specifically put into crafting the statement and the resolution. Was it how many seconds, Liza Jane? Do we have our attention span for? 7. So I've already forgotten. So Liza Jane said, this resolution is great. The wording is great in here, but we have a 7-second attention span. And if we really want people to understand what we're trying to do, we need to have an elevator pitch that we can very quickly get across to people for the intent for what we're trying to do here. So as we fulfill our mission of helping to protect and restore healthy watersheds and natural habitats that support thriving communities and strong economies, OWEB and its staff are committed to advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, environmental justice, and a sense of belonging in the work we do. In this way, we seek to celebrate the rich cultural, socioeconomic, and natural resources of Oregon and work with our local partners to engage all Oregonians. That sums it up pretty well. And then to get into the actual resolution, as I mentioned, I'm not going to read all of this, but we have the background section, all the whereas statements with what we're trying to do, the intent, and then we get down to the resolution, the be it resolved. This is more of our policy. Be it further resolved, how we're going to implement that. So we had a little bit of a discussion about this as well at our strategic planning session yesterday, and incorporating this into the strategic plan for what we're actually gonna do to get it done. So Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
No, Kelly, you did a great job covering the background, and the only thing I would emphasize is that it took us time to get here where we are today in this meeting, and I'm sure you'll punctuate some of the high notes there.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we're taking our time with this because we want to do it right, and sometimes it takes you a while to get it right. So, as I mentioned, there's a copy in the board packet. We would like to request that board members please review the statement and resolution and provide feedback to Stephanie, Dan, and I before the next DEI committee meeting, which is December 5th. So it would be great if you could get comments into us the week of November 12th. I walked it back a couple of weeks because we have that Thanksgiving week in there as well, just to give staff some time to put the comments together before our next meeting. And then, yes, actually, that would be great. Thanks, Lisa. It would be wonderful if we could talk a little bit briefly about some of the feedback that we've received on it. If you don't mind. Okay, thank you.
Have Stephanie come up because she's done the bulk of the work around this. And Steph, why don't you talk about who we've done outreach to so far and who we're scheduled to do additional outreach to, if you would, please.
Absolutely. Good morning, board members. Stephanie Page, Deputy Director. So since the last DEI committee meeting, our staff reached out to the Environmental Justice Council and spoke with the council coordinator. The council coordinator recommended that we instead reach out to the Racial Justice Council's Environmental Equity Committee because they assist a variety of agencies with their DEI work and provide feedback. So that was one opportunity that we had. I presented an OWEB 101, as Bruce mentioned earlier, and Bruce joined, which was wonderful. It was great to have us both there to have that conversation with the committee. The committee really appreciated the outreach and basically invited us to engage with them on an ongoing basis as we do DEI work. So that was a really great opportunity. We've gathered feedback from staff. So several staff have provided feedback on the resolution. And then Lisa and I had a great conversation with the new Director of Cultural Change at the state's Department of Administrative Services. So her role is also to assist agencies with DEI work across the state enterprise.
And I can go on and share some of the feedback that we received during those conversations. And in terms of next steps, one thing that is still to come is that the Environmental Equity Committee of the Racial Justice Council will be doing a survey of their members around the draft resolution and sharing additional written feedback with us. So that is a standard process that they use when engaging with agencies on these types of statements. In terms of our conversation with DAS and some of the feedback from our staff, I think just some basic suggested additions to think about included adding some definitions. There were a few questions from the Environmental Equity Committee, I think, about terminology. And so just making sure that it's clear to a reader unfamiliar with OWEB, what we're referring to in a few cases, adding an explanation of the purpose of the statement and resolution, giving ourselves credit for what we are doing and have done. So that was really, I think, one of the takeaways from the conversation with DAS is that to weave in additional reflections of what we've already done and all of that work. There was a lot of interest from the council committee members in the training that we've all collectively participated in. So I think they were really impressed to hear that the full board and staff had participated in that, and asked how we had accomplished that and how we had funded it. There were some questions on implementation and how would we measure success. Suggestion about adding a reference to diversity among the board and staff. I think other things that came up between the different sources included kind of thinking about what is within our span of control as a board and agency, thinking about, and it reminded me of some of the conversation around the strategic plan yesterday. What are the sideboards that come with the funding that OWEB administers, and so how does that affect our span of control and the implementation of the resolution? Are there ways to consolidate some of the background statements and also weave in inclusion more, since the statement includes inclusion? And then I think just questions about the pace and scale of implementation and staff workload. So Bruce or Lisa, anything else that you can think of that was a real theme?
The only other thing I would just add, I think, the equity statement and the resolution, when you put them together, has a lot of aspirational work in it. And so as we work towards adopting the resolution and thinking about how it's implemented and thinking about the impacts on staff and pacing and the work we've done in the last 2 years in terms of trying to balance workload and make sure that we have adequate resources to get things done. I would encourage the board to think about that, but I think this is about how. It's about the how we do a lot of different things and deeper, reaching into additional communities.
I will just add I agree with that, but a slightly different take. The bold part of our climate resolution doesn't seem so bold right now. And it's only a year old. It doesn't seem bold anymore. It just seems like, hey, we're doing it. There are always concerns about something as extensive and as seemingly fundamental as the resolution as it currently exists and as it's being developed. Concerns on how do we do it? Do we have enough people, workload, and all that? And I will say, yes, we'll deal with that. If there's anything that there isn't is there anything that doesn't deserve to be worked on, we should get rid of it. But I don't want us to do less than we feel is a bold aspirational. I will remind the board and certainly applaud the staff. We know how to do equity. You look at the 6 geographic areas in Oregon, and we don't do everything equally, but we equitably deal geographically with this, with Oregon. So we know how to do it. We're talking about applying it to all watersheds with different representative groups that live within them. And that's going to take a little more work, but we know how to get there. And so I like what you're saying. Let's, how are we going to do it? This resolution should be what we feel we need to do. And then we'll work on how to do it. So.
A question I have is, when will we know what is meant by be it resolved? What is the how? What does that mean? I have questions, and the answers aren't in here yet. So when do we learn that? In strategic planning, in steps?
So thank you for that question. I think that your comments about the implementation or the how or what those questions are will be really helpful to provide to the DEI committee so that they can think about that and think about how to incorporate it. This was, a deep body of work in a short period of time. Again, we had done work and we'd learned a lot, and we stepped back and we stepped forward and we stepped back again. And so I think those questions, as Kelly asked you, to provide comments, that will help continue to form this moving forward as you move toward having a resolution that the board can adopt.
And I've noted the point of getting specific comments in, but I did also have kind of an overarching question, and that's really in the opening statement. In the second, which is the last sentence, it talks about, in this way we seek, so it gets to that, the purpose piece, to celebrate the rich cultural, socioeconomic, and natural resources of Oregon and work with our local partners to engage all Oregonians. And we kind of touched on this a little bit yesterday in the strategic plan of looking at the directive words in these and what we also can do and not in terms of telling a story or not. And the word celebrate jumps out because it seems like we're looking to get stuff done, not quote unquote just celebrating things. So I'm wondering, and this would be one of my comments, but would it be more appropriate to talk about we seek to engage, be rich, cultural, and put that word there? And then later in the sentence, it does say to engage all Oregonians. But when I see this work is really our ability to better serve all Oregonians. But it just, in terms of a general reflection, not just kind of observing or thinking about or even celebrating. Celebrating is good, but also like actively engaging in our work and in our investments in our communities. And so I'm not sure if there was a discussion around that or if this just becomes part of that ongoing discussion.
Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, we didn't, the specificity around celebrate, we didn't wordsmith that one in particular very much. So I appreciate the comment because it's just a refocusing of getting the work done, right? And I appreciate that. So there's room to tweak any of this as we see fit. We just felt like now was a good time to bring it to the board to get your input.
Sorry, Chair, if I may just say again, incredible amount of work, and I apologize for jumping into a nuance, an incredible amount of work, greatly appreciated, part of the direction that the entire board has asked for and is taking as we're going through our learning process. And so I apologize for not making that my own opening remarks.
No offense taken.
Stephen?
Yeah, and I just also agree with what Jamie just said, and that and maybe this is going too far when you're thinking about aspirational things and taking the steps in the right direction, but maybe as you're going through this, think about how do you measure success? And how would we measure success in taking these steps? Is there some ways that we can look at things to see if we're making improvements?
Thank you.
Meg?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to, because the use of the word celebrate there was one of my favorite things about this whole document, basically. I feel like I have to put a pin in this, but, and we can talk more about it, but, you know, elevating things and celebrating them are really, that speaks to me and to people generally. And so I really liked seeing that word here, but there'll be more to come on that. Yeah.
Really? Thanks, Meg, for that. I do like the word celebrate in there, because I feel like it's a focus on being optimistic and uplifting, right? So I feel like we may have space to keep the word celebrate, but also add something that's more of like an action verb for how we're going to do it too. So keep the positivity and, you know, the kind of uplift to it, but also talk about how, you know, more of how we're going to get it done. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, just a quick reminder on where a lot of this originated. There are statewide mandates on DEI and EJ that were in a House, one of the bills, and through commissions that are directives to the agencies. Those are reflected. So there are also the comments, the very rich conversation this board had in the April 2022 meeting. That was carefully documented, and those notes are included in this resolution. The idea of using plain language to the extent we could. I mean, I even have on the equity statement, it's always bothered me to say that helping to protect and restore healthy watersheds. Wait a minute, we do not have to restore a healthy watershed. We're protecting healthy watersheds, but we're not restoring a healthy watershed. But anyway, that's just, so I as we look at fine tuning language throughout those things, I just want to remind everybody that some of it is mandated and that needs to be included because we are an agency. Some of it was directed by us and some of it is being influenced by the input we're getting back. If I have any regret, it's that we didn't reach out a little sooner, but it took us this long to get something to hand them. So anyway, it's changed how I see things. Thank you.
Well, and I just want to thank the board and the committee for working on the statement, so that there was a statement that united the desires of the board and the staff into one entity, into what we aspire to be and celebrate and engage in, to give us kind of that Northern Star. And I think the initial statement helps to do that for all of OWEB.
All right, thank you. One more, because we still have another topic under this agenda item to talk about.
We do. But I just wanted to throw out there that December 5th meeting, all board members can join and listen to that. So please provide comments, and you're welcome to join and listen in on that as well.
And this is coming back to us in January. And then again, isn't it, is this coming back, or do you think we're voting in January? Is that the committee's wish, is to bring it for action?
I'm not sure. Depends on where we're at.
Okay, all right. So it's not the last time we're seeing this. So thank you for your hard work. And who is taking on sub A under, yeah, okay, awesome. Take it away, Kelly.
Thank you for that robust discussion. Looking forward to seeing everyone's comments as they come in. The other thing that we discussed at our last committee meeting, staff reviewed information about the co-chair elections process that was summarized in an email that Liza Jane sent out to everyone. Staff shared research indicating that votes for co-chair must be done through a public process. The committee discussed recommendations around the elections process going forward, including the number of terms a co-chair may serve and the staggering of terms. And we have some draft language regarding the co-chair terms and elections process that I want to share with everyone. And I don't think. Okay. So hopefully this won't be the first time you guys are hearing this. So OWEB statute requires election of a chair from among the voting board members. The policy of the OWEB board is to implement the statute by electing co-chairs among the voting members. So this is our draft, what we're proposing. Each co-chair may serve a maximum of 3 two-year terms. To ensure continuity of board leadership and transfer of information from outgoing experienced co-chairs, the board co-chairs will serve staggered 2-year terms that are offset from each other by 1 year. At least one of the co-chairs must be a public at-large board member. No more than one co-chair may be a representative from the other state boards and commissions with seats on the OWEB board. The tribal representative is eligible and encouraged to serve for either of the co-chair positions. An election for one of the 2-year co-chair terms will take place each July. Staff will remind the board of the upcoming election annually at the April board meeting. If the co-chair whose seat is up for election wishes to pursue re-election, the co-chair who is not up for re-election will conduct the elections process. The co-chair overseeing the elections process will accept nominations from the floor, encouraging any interested voting members to participate. A newly elected co-chair will begin their co-chair responsibilities at the end of the board meeting when they are elected. And I'd be happy to take any questions or comments on this.
Go ahead, Jamie.
So thank you for your work on this. And thanks, Lisa, and I think Liza Jane stepped in and was working on this. So thank you all for your work and the committee for taking this on. Really appreciate that. And thanks also, Barbara, for your respect in the process and that conversation that came up last. I thought it made a lot of sense to talk about, hey, how do we do this, and put some process around it. So I think that's a really healthy thing. I'm in my second term, and I'm looking back at some of the co-chairs we've had and that ties into this process. And then also I've been thinking a lot about the conversation we just had around recognizing tribal governments and the government to government and really elevating that stature. And when I came onto the board, or shortly after, we had the previous tribal representative serving as one of the co-chairs. And so I really appreciate the language in here that says the tribal representative is eligible and encouraged to serve. But I would, and obviously you cannot force someone to step forward and express interest, but I would like to suggest we make that language a bit stronger, and to even say strongly encourage consideration or something along those lines, because I think what it does is it provides that encouragement, but also makes a public statement about OWEB's commitment to the government-to-government relationship. And so how that and when that weaves in is a part of individual decisions and board decisions. But I think having stronger language about that in our policy and having greater consideration for that is an important part of making a statement about our government-to-government commitment to government-government relationship. And I know that when the former tribal chair stepped off and Kelly stepped into that role, you were new to the board, and so there was a logical not stepping into that role as someone totally new to the board. But that would be, I think this I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I appreciate the, let's step back and consider the process approach that everyone's taken. I think this is great work, but I would just suggest in that piece, in that line, to strengthen that language in terms of encouragement. It ultimately comes down to a willingness to serve and a consideration by the board, the voting members. But I think it makes a statement about OWEB's commitment to the government relations to have stronger language in that regard.
Liza Jane?
And I'd like to thank you for this work, what you came up with. I would like to challenge the 3 terms, and I'll tell you why. We're on the board for a limit of 8 years. So if somebody can serve 6 years, they'll only have maybe a year on the board before they become co-chair. And then, you know, it's a really positive thing that happens, I believe, here, where the co-chair goes back to being a member, and so they're present for that last year or 2, willing and potentially able to support the new co-chair, and also as a source of hysterical knowledge. So I really want to, I like that, and I think it's wise. And so I think 2 years, I'm also a proponent of term limits. I love fresh eyes. And so I would like us to consider leaving what I thought was already in place was a 2-year, a 2-term limit, so that we can preserve some of that within our 8 years of time on the board.
Mark?
So I kind of hesitate whether to bring this up because I'm not sure I even agree with myself here or not, but I'll bring it up just. So I totally understand the voting members and the non-voting members. And the way it's written right now, the draft is, it would be, the chairs would be approved by the voting members. But when the advisory group, the advisory non-voting members, which is almost half of this board, not quite, but almost half of this board, to leave them out of that decision is, we're really doing just an administrative process, in my opinion. This is what it is. And so I don't know if it's an OAR that says that agencies can't vote, but if it's an administrative, just administrative process of who we want to lead this organization, it just seems like to me that everybody, the entire group should vote on it. But if we've got some OAR that says, nope, feds can't vote on anything, so you know, I can support that. But it just seems like it's, from an administrative standpoint, it's not telling a federal agency, man, you're breaking the law if you vote for a chair of a board. So it would be, instead of only half the people voting for the chair and vice, or co-chair, excuse me, it seems like to me, maybe we ought to all vote and for the whoever's going to be the administrative head of this, and you're not, you know, affecting your federal agency by saying, well, I support this person for a co-chair. Am I totally out of line here or what? Lisa wants to jump in.
Go ahead, Lisa.
So I don't have the statute in front of me, and I would need to go back and look at that. But it definitely delineates between who the voting members are on the board and who the non-voting members are on the board. For the board. And so yeah, and so I would need to go dissect that a little bit more.
That's why I question myself.
So we're at a pretty hard stop time. And this is the first we're seeing this, and we didn't get it in writing to review it ahead of time. So I didn't absorb everything that Kelly read to us. I would rather have sat with it myself. And one of the things that does stand out is 3 2-year terms makes me a little uncomfortable. I like the old 2-year terms, because it's more than half their time on the board if they did those, but.
I authored the 3 2-year terms. The reason was, I figured it took 2 years before anybody had enough background and experience to where they would feel comfortable and competent to be a chair. And then they had a remaining 6 years, which is 3-2. All of the rationale, and that was it. That was the end of that rationale. The idea that you would have a greater turnover, more people in leadership positions. I really like the idea of former chairs still serving on the board to add they become weighty friends and add their knowledge. I think that's a wonderful thing to have. In a Quaker sense, not in a biological sense. So I am perfectly happy. The issue with at what point do you have the tribal representative being a chair? They go off the board. The new tribal representative, then if you have somehow mandated that one of the co-chairs be a tribal representative, then you have a brand new board member stepping in at his first meeting as the new co-chair. So I think there may be instances where that makes sense, but to mandate it. So your idea, I believe your idea of strongly encouraging is fine. But any further than that, I think we start to run into, there will be times if there is a tribal co-chair going off that where you may not, his or her replacement may be brand new and not feel inclined to want to be chair at that point. So we've that flexibility. The 2 4-year terms or the 2 2-year terms, I'm absolutely fine with.
Kelly?
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone's comments on this. And my apologies, I thought this went out to the whole board. I think it just went out to the Environmental Justice Committee. So what I would suggest, because we have a little bit more research to do, is that we push this to tomorrow prior to the co-chair election. We can finish the conversation and we can also have staff do a little bit more research about whether or not there's an OAR that we need to adhere to for the agencies to be able to vote. So does that work for folks? Because I know we're on a tight timeline.
Hold on, yes, I'm seeing shakings of the head, but Elijah Jane's going to comment.
Miss the best ever, Nicole, can we get a copy today so that we could each of us look at that tonight? Thank you so much.
Eric?
Yes, the research is complete. I have the statute in front of me. It's ORS 541.900. It does very clearly say the voting members of the board shall select a chairperson from among the voting members of the board.
Okay, thank you.
It was a good.
Okay, so we are tabling this until tomorrow. Right, Lisa, did you want to jump in?
Would you like Stephanie and I to make a stab at incorporating a couple of the comments from this for what's brought back for tomorrow?
Can you see it tonight?
I think we can probably do it very quickly if we can find a printer.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. All right, we are moving down. Oh, go ahead, Liza Jane, sorry.
Hi, Courtney. We are at item EFG, can't see, with our ODFW PCSRF uses. And Courtney's going to present this for us.
Yay, all right, great. The
pause. Does it actually work? So good morning, everyone. For the record, Courtney Schaff, a Monitoring and Reporting Program Manager. And with me today is Alexis Harrison from ODFW, and she is the Acting Conservation and Recovery Programs Manager. And she's going to give you an update about how ODFW uses the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Funds that OWEB receives through our application to NOAA annually. So just very quickly setting it up, OWEB is the state designated applicant to apply for the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Funds. We apply annually. ODFW assists in writing that application, and they are specifically called out for actions and activities in that application. And then we enter into a cooperative agreement to transfer some of those funds to ODFW for the projects that Alexis will talk about. Just really quickly, in our fiscal year 21 and 22 applications, ODFW received about $6.3 million. And in our most recent application, the 23 application, they received $6.4 million. And also, so in our 23 application, OWEB received $20.2 million. Some of that was called out specifically for Klamath as part of our contingency restoration. So we received $5.7 million of bipartisan infrastructure law funding as part of that $20.2 million. Most of that, which will go to on-the-ground restoration projects, some technical assistance for design of on-the-ground restoration projects, and then some staffing costs. So that's all the introduction I wanted to give, and hand it over. So introduce yourself.
All right, hi everybody. Thanks for having me today. My name is Alexis Harrison, and I'm the acting program manager for ODFW's Conservation and Recovery Program. That's a program that seeks to understand, conserve, and restore native fish populations across the state. And the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund is a critical source of funding for many of our efforts, many key programs. So today I'll be giving you a broad overview of what this funding supports, and then I'll highlight in a little bit more detail 3 recent projects that we've been working on that I think exemplify our efforts, and will give you a sense of what's coming up. So in the last biennium, and there's a presentation up here if you're...
They can see it actually below.
Oh, perfect, okay.
We have quite the setup here.
Thank you. In the last biennium, as Courtney mentioned, ODFW was awarded approximately $12.6 million to support salmon and steelhead conservation. And while we're still working on the details of the current biennium, we're expecting roughly similar levels of funding. I've broken down our funding here by priority level, which is defined in the PCSRF program. Priority 1 projects are on-the-ground implementation projects that improve habitat for salmon and steelhead, and this accounts for about half of our total workload in this program. Priority 2 projects include monitoring projects, and these projects really give us a sense of what's happening to these populations in the wild. And monitoring data is critical for understanding if our implementation projects are having a positive effect, for supporting ESA decision-making around these species, for determining where to prioritize work for restoration, and for helping to track our progress towards meeting recovery goals. Priority 3 projects include everything else. So some examples of what might fall into priority 3, we provide technical support and outreach for implementation projects. So that's helping to educate people about what sorts of opportunities are available to do their own projects. We provide coordination efforts for many of these populations. We also have a large reintroduction program for chum salmon that's supported under priority 3. So I'm going to show you guys another breakdown. This is effectively, there are 5 big program areas that are supported by this funding. The fish screening and passage program is about 36% of our total where our funds go. The Oregon Plan monitoring is about 30%. Lower Columbia River harvest management is about 15%. Plan implementation and technical support is about 16%, and the chum reintroduction project is about 6%. And I'd like to mention that this work is also supported by additional grants and contracts. So PCSRF isn't the only fund source that's supporting all of this work. So that gives you a broad sense of where this funding is being used in our agency. Next, I'd like to highlight 3 specific projects that have been supported by these funds to give you a better sense of what this work looks like. The first thing I'll talk about is our Beaver Action Plan. Next, I'll describe a screening and passage project at Annie Creek, which is not too far from here. And finally, I'll talk about monitoring work that we're doing in preparation for the removal of the Klamath dams. All right, so starting with the Beaver Action Plan. As many of you are already aware, beaver are an important player on the landscape. They act as landscape engineers in many settings, and there are fewer beaver dams on the landscape than there were historically. This matters to salmon and steelhead because beaver modified habitats increase habitat complexity and connectivity, and these are really critical features of the habitat for juvenile rearing of salmon and steelhead. Beaver dams can also moderate in-stream flows, which provides greater stability in the stream when there's floods, droughts. It can even provide resilience for these habitats in the face of wildfire. So beaver dams really have a lot of really positive impacts for salmon and steelhead. And they're also beneficial for amphibians, reptiles, birds, and other wildlife. So we see beaver modified habitats as a really important tool for conservation efforts. So before I talk about the details of the plan, I'd like to highlight that this is an integrative plan that builds on a lot of prior efforts. And I've highlighted some of the different plans that have previously mentioned beaver modified habitats as relevant to fish conservation. So we've worked to build the Beaver Action Plan collaboratively, working with federal, tribal, and state agencies, watershed councils, soil and water conservation districts, non-governmental organizations, and private landowners. And these partnerships are really critical to this effort. And before I move on, I'd like to mention that throughout this presentation, when I reference documents like the ones shown here, I've included a hyperlink in the presentation. So you can use this presentation as a resource to find more information about any of these plans. All right, so what is the Beaver Action Plan? The overarching goal of this plan is to, pardon me. The overarching goal of this plan is to accelerate the restoration of beaver habitat and beaver modified habitats at the landscape scale in Oregon. This is likely to be a long-term project, but we're focusing on the next 3 years so we can really jumpstart progress on this front. I'm going to use the terms beaver habitat and beaver modified habitat a lot, so I thought I'd just take a moment to define those. Beaver habitat is any habitat that can support beaver, so it provides sufficient food, cover, water, and space for beaver to live. Beaver modified habitat is any habitat, both aquatic or terrestrial, that's altered by beaver activity. So examples would include beaver dams, the ponding of water on the surface around those dams, and surface water on the floodplain adjacent, raising the groundwater, trapping sediment, aggrading streams, and promoting wetland plant growth. Under this overarching goal, there are 4 pillars that support achieving this goal, and these are sort of sub-goals. Next slide. The first of these is data and science. So we are seeking to have a better understanding of the distribution and abundance of beaver and beaver modified habitat across the landscape. We're also seeking to have a better understanding of the constraints on beaver and beaver modified habitats, and to gain a better understanding of what beaver need in order to persist in an area and engage in these landscape engineering type behaviors in an area. The second pillar is habitat restoration. So we're developing and implementing restoration actions that can both increase beaver habitat and increase beaver modification of habitats in areas where they're present. We're also working on beaver management. So as you may be aware, there is sometimes conflict between beaver and landowners, and we're working to improve management outcomes by advancing coexistence strategies and solutions that can leave people and beaver both on the landscape coexisting peacefully. And in support of all of these efforts, we also have outreach and communication. So we're seeking to increase awareness of the benefits of beaver and beaver modified habitats, and to increase willingness to implement beaver coexistence strategies. So for each of these 4 pillars, ODFW has defined strategic actions, staff leads, timelines, and we've also identified 10 key watersheds across the state where we will focus our initial efforts. So beaver emphasis areas, which are shown on this map. We aren't going to limit our activity to these areas, but we do think these are areas where there's a lot of potential to make significant progress in the near term. So that's where we're focusing, at least in this initial 3-year period. We're also, let's see, so the Beaver Action Plan has already been completed. It was, the written document was completed in June of 2023, and we've already started implementing many of the steps that were outlined in the plan. There are just too many examples to go into, but I'll highlight a couple. On the right here, we can see a restoration project on the South Fork Sprague River, also not too far from here. And this is the installation of a beaver dam analog, which can help raise the water table and make the habitat more suitable for beaver. So hopefully bringing in more beaver populations to restore a functional beaver meadow. On the left, you can see this is called a pond leveler, and this is a device that can be installed in a site with a beaver dam that allows water to bypass the dam, and the beaver can't keep raising the water level. This can prevent conflict in areas where there's human and beaver cohabiting. So this is one of our coexistence strategies. We're currently working on a beaver flow device best management practices manual, which can be distributed to partners and people across the state to help support these coexistence strategies in many landscapes. All right, just to summarize, the Beaver Action Plan, it's already in place. It outlines a 3-year strategy to accelerate restoration of beaver habitat and beaver modified habitats, and it's already underway. We're really excited to be creating shared information resources and tools that can support not only the work in our agency, but work by partners and other agencies across the state to achieve this goal. We're taking an all hands on deck approach. We have expertise from our fish division, wildlife, and habitat divisions. So we're really taking advantage of all of the expertise that we have to support this effort. And we're also building creative partnerships to get this work done. All right, switching gears, let me tell you about a screening and passage project that we recently completed. So as you likely know, salmon and steelhead are anadromous. They spend the earliest part of their life in freshwater habitats far inland, migrate out to sea, spend years rearing there, and then come back to spawn. Navigating to and from these spawning areas is like navigating a labyrinth. And it can be really challenging for fish, and the human-built environment hasn't made it easier. Barriers can prevent fish from moving upstream and getting to historic spawning areas, and diversions can provide a sort of a dead end where fish that are trying to migrate out wander off the main channel and can get trapped and not make it to the ocean. So together, these challenges comprise a significant impediment to salmon and steelhead recovery and are identified in all of the recovery plans focused on these species. And our screening and passage program helps to remove or modify barriers and screen diversions to help the fish successfully make their migration. So I'll highlight just one project that was completed just a few months ago. This is a project on Annie Creek. Annie Creek is a tributary of the Wood River in the Klamath Basin. I should have marked on the map where we are so you can see in reference to our current location, but it's not that far from here. So the site on Annie Creek was originally characterized by a significant barrier to fish migration, and then 2 irrigation diversions that carry water to agricultural areas. We undertook a project at the site to install passage around that barrier and to install screens on each of those diversions to make this an easier place for fish to navigate. So this picture shows what the site looked like prior to our project. The next picture shows the site after it was modified, so a fairly recent picture. So the next picture shows that fish passage around the barrier. So this is a passage channel that allows fish to move upstream in spite of the barrier still being in place. And our fish passage projects are designed to allow fish, all native fish that are migratory, to move upstream. So salmon, steelhead, but also Pacific lamprey, all of the species are equally served by these passage projects. We also have 2 screens at this site. I think I've got some pictures of these. So these are rotary drum screens that prevent fish from moving down into these agricultural diversion areas, keep them in that main channel, help direct them to the right place. And these screening sites are generally, if you're familiar with this, they're usually defined in terms of how many cubic feet per second are screened. This is a site that screens 11.1 cubic feet per second combined flow from each side of this site. All right, so this project does have an immediate impact on native red band trout, and it will provide passage for Chinook and steelhead once the Klamath dams are removed. All right, so speaking of the Klamath Dam removals, this is the final highlight that I'm going to provide today. ODFW has started to prepare for the Klamath Dam removals. There's a lot of needs in terms of monitoring and preparation for salmon and steelhead. So I think you're already all aware that the Upper Klamath Basin has been inaccessible to anadromous fish for over a century. There are 4 dams that have blocked fish passage upstream, and collectively they block approximately 400 miles of potential spawning habitat for salmon and steelhead. Once these dams are removed, we're hoping that this is going to make a huge impact on salmon and steelhead, opening up an enormous amount of habitat. As you probably know, the first of these dams, Copco 2, was removed earlier this year, and the other 3 dams are slated for removal next year. I've included a before and after picture of that first dam removal, just because it's such a dramatic change in terms of how that river looks, and especially how it looks to a migratory salmon or steelhead. And I understand you guys are going to go tour J.C. Boyle Dam next, so take some before pictures, so you can go back and get after pictures next year. So historically, 3 anadromous species have used the Upper Klamath Basin. These include coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and steelhead trout. Additionally, Pacific lamprey would have been making this migration historically. And ODFW has really started planning for reintroduction to these areas. As you know, the process to remove the dams has been fairly prolonged. So we wrote our initial plan for reintroduction in 2008. We've expanded that into an implementation strategy for the anadromous fishes that was completed in December of 2021. And we do expect that for most of these fisheries, there will be a natural recolonization. So salmon and steelhead do come, there's one exception, but most of them come right up to the base of the Iron Gate Dam. And we think they're gonna, as soon as it's open, they're just gonna keep going and start exploring this habitat and recolonizing. However, there's still a ton of questions about what's gonna happen in the wake of these dam removals. How long will natural recolonization take? We aren't sure. What areas will salmon and steelhead favor when they return to these areas? Not known. What kind of habitat improvements can we make to encourage recolonization in these areas and really try and get a robust populations up in the Upper Klamath? How will this impact other resident fish in the Upper Klamath? And we do expect to see impacts on water quality, flow, water temperatures. So we're really interested to see how those changes play out as the dams come down. So we've started making some preliminary efforts to gather data so that we have a before comparison, and we can go back and evaluate after the dams are removed what impact it's had. Some of those efforts include monitoring native resident fish, monitoring water temperature and other elements of water quality. We're doing some pathogen screening in different parts of the basin because we're not sure how pathogen transmission is going to change given the new landscape and the new migratory patterns. We're also looking at the genetics of trout throughout the basin. We expect, I'm not quite sure what we expect. There's going to be changes. We expect changes. And we want to see what sort of changes those are. We're also setting up to do radio telemetry tracking of Chinook at Keno Dam. This is a dam that is remaining in the river, but it does provide fish passage, so it's a really convenient site to try and collect data related to Chinook movement. We're also doing a lot of work to assess habitat, in trying to determine which areas have the highest potential for recolonization. And next slide. Coho salmon have been a major focus of these efforts, in part because the Southern Oregon, Northern California coast ESUs are listed as threatened, and in part because there's a smaller area of the Upper Klamath that's considered likely to be suitable for coho. So we're really trying to hone our understanding of which sites are the most likely areas so we can really pay close attention to what happens. We've also started to identify high priority habitat restoration projects, and we're working to be ready to get more of those projects on the ground in the very near future. So by this time next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, all of the dams will have been removed, and we'll be watching potentially the first run in over a century of anadromous fish moving up into these areas. It's a really critical period for monitoring, and I hope you'll agree with me that it's an exciting time in terms of waiting to see what happens. I think we're going to see some exciting developments, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to see some significant progress towards recovery for all of these species. With that, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to me today, and I'm happy to spend some time answering any questions you have. I also would be happy to follow up later with other questions. I'll hand out my business card, and you can email me if you want to know more about any of this.
Thank you. Kelly has a question, comment.
Thank you. Great presentation. I have a question about the fish passage at Keno. Do you know that there will be lamprey, Pacific lamprey passage, or will you be looking to evaluate the fish ladder to determine if lamprey can pass, or maybe putting in a lamprey ramp? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question, and I can't answer confidently. I'm still a little bit new to the program. I'm gonna look that up and get back to you and let you know.
Sounds great.
Chris?
Hi, Alex. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you.
I'm curious, thanks, Dan. I'm curious regarding the reintroduction upstream of the dams. It sounds like it's largely being left to fish exploring and recolonizing on their own. Is that the case, or is there also a tribal or state hatchery kind of Head Start type program similar to what occurred in the Elwha system after dam removal?
So, though I mentioned that I think there's one run that we don't think is probably going to naturally recolonize, that's spring Chinook. The nearest potential source population is rather distant from the Upper Klamath. So we're exploring the potential to do a active reintroduction with spring Chinook in this area. For the other fish, I think we're going to wait and see and revisit if we don't start to see natural recolonization of this area.
Barbara.
So I want to go back to the beaver project. So what impact does nutria have on the beaver population?
That is a really good question. And I can't give you a good scientifically supported answer. It does seem like there is definitely the potential for there to be an interaction.
Come to my farm.
Which do you have more of? Which do you have more of, beaver or nutria?
The riverbank is being compromised.
Gary.
Gary Marsh for the record. So along with the beaver topic, I can remember as youth in my area that there was millions of beaver, it seemed like, and they got trapped out. But we used to go up these little creeks and fish, and it was just really good. But I noticed on the map that isn't one of the areas that watersheds are being considered for whatever projects are going to be in it. And so I would encourage that to apply to, all the parts of the state.
Yeah, that's a great point. And like I said, we're not limited to those areas, but we really wanted to focus for the first 3 years, kind of roll this out, see how it goes. And, one of the outcomes, hopefully when we have some tools that are developed that can really help us effectively get more beaver modified habitat, we'll see a much broader rollout. But what is the area that you're?
Southeast Oregon, and I just really, I think beaver are really a major part of what's missing out there in our healthy watersheds. So, the sooner we can get that problem solved, the better, I think.
I agree. Thank you.
Dan?
Just 2 comments. One is I recently read a great book that if you're interested in beaver, you might be interested. It's called Eager, and it's by Ben Goldfarb. The Surprising Secret Life of Beavers and Why They Matter. And it's fascinating. It talks about what they do on the landscape and also a lot of these measures that you're talking about to reduce the conflict. And then the second is, I guess, kind of a question, which is, I actually have a beaver that just moved into my backyard in Southwest Portland. And it's wonderful, even though it ate some of the trees that I planted for restoration efforts, but that's okay. And the water level is creeping up. And so maybe at some point in time, we need to talk to you about a pond leveling device.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want to let it creep up too high. It's right next to your house.
I don't see other comments. My experience in Wallowa County and on my land in particular is the beaver have moved in, but the stream is too fast for them. So they're just eating all the trees that this group helped plant. And the otters have moved in and they're eating most of the, not most, but a whole lot of the fish that we built for. So I think that's a natural part of creating the whole. As a private landowner, it's difficult. But I've also learned to just be patient and watch. I'm curious, because other landowners around me are having some fits. And I'm wondering about these water level bypass. Are beavers in favor of those? Because they kind of have their own scene. Like, is that working? It looks good, but.
So my understanding is that it does work. The beaver aren't very effective at figuring out why they're effective at keeping the water level, right? Keeping the water from going up. Obviously, if beaver are trying to build up higher, they're probably opposed to the pond levelers, but it's a way, it's a give and take. So they do seem to be effective.
Yes, Dan?
I was just gonna say, for the beaver, it's probably better than the alternative.
I have for the record, Courtney Schaff, Monitoring and Reporting Program Manager. I'm definitely hearing a lot of interest in the ODFW Beaver Action Plan. Maybe it's something we can follow up with and have a future presentation on that to the board. Seems like there's a lot of interest in eager beaver.
A lot of watersheds councils are working on projects too. It would be great to keep abreast of this. So without other questions or comments, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Courtney. Very awesome to
Thank you all
have
very
you here.
much.
Let us know what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay, well, don't wiggle or move, but we are going to adjourn for now, for today. And now I'm going to ask